when Victor looked me straight in the eye and told me I did not have enough leadership presence to head the film I had practically built with my own hands, I did not argue. I smiled, stood up, and drove home in silence. 3 days later, I turned on my phone and found 87 missed calls and an entire company descending into chaos. My name is Maya Bennett. I am 35 years old, and for nearly a decade, I played the sister who always gave in for the sake of the family and the employee, who quietly rescued every project without ever asking for credit. If you have ever sacrificed your entire career just to keep the peace in a family that never thinks you have given enough, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. And do not forget to like and subscribe, because what happens next will show you exactly how the people who deliberately pushed me aside ended up destroying themselves with their own hands. The phone kept vibrating on the kitchen table, shattering the silence I had deliberately preserved for the past 3 days. 87 missed calls, 126 text messages, 14 emails marked urgent, 6 messages from Victor Lang, president of North Star Media, the man who, just 3 days earlier, had sat across from me in the private screening room and told me I did not have enough presence to be the public face of my own project. More than 30 calls from Derek, my brother-in-law, who had just been handed the executive producer position that should have been mine, and one short cold notice that told me the full scale of what was collapsing. Aurora Streaming was demanding that North Star prove its rights to use all the footage in Predators at the Edge within 24 hours. I opened the final voicemail. Derek's voice trembled through the speaker, with none of the confidence he had displayed when he accepted that title in front of the entire conference room. Maya, every important file is offline. They're going to cancel the contract if you don't call back. I set the phone down on the table, poured a cup of coffee, and drank it slowly, as though it were an ordinary morning. Not the morning an entire media company was reeling because I was no longer there. You may be wondering how I could possibly be so calm. The answer is very simple. 3 days earlier, the same people calling me now had sat in a room, looked me straight in the eye, and told me I did not have what it took to lead my own film. So why, only 3 days later, did they need the very person they had just pushed aside to save everything? To understand what was really happening inside North Star Media's offices at that moment, I need to take you back 3 days, to the morning everything began to fall apart. That morning, I arrived at North Star 40 minutes earlier than usual. I wore the only blazer in my closet that I considered formal enough. I carried a thick color-coded binder containing the 8-episode release plan, a list of cinematographers, a licensing cost sheet, and the post-production roadmap for the next 18 months. I had spent 2 weeks preparing for that meeting. The truth was I had spent 3 years preparing for it. North Star's private screening room was on the 17th floor, a dark room with 12 gray velvet chairs and a screen that covered the entire front wall. When I walked in, the lights were already off, and the 90-second trailer for Predators at the Edge was playing on the screen. The opening shot showed a mother cheetah standing beside a dry riverbed, watching the muddy water while her 3 cubs huddled behind her legs. I knew exactly where that shot had been filmed, on what day, and under what lighting conditions. I was the one who signed the agreement to obtain it, then spent 3 straight nights in the editing room, finding the exact 4 seconds that would make an audience hold its breath. For 3 years, I had built the 8-episode structure for this film. I had watched thousands of hours of raw footage to select the shots that made it into the cut. I had rewritten the entire narration after the distributor rejected the first draft. I had saved the pilot edit when it nearly got canceled last November. And I was the one who persuaded Aurora Streaming to spend 40 minutes watching a wildlife documentary project that no one in the industry believed could sell. So when Victor Lang turned on the lights and said he wanted to discuss the future of this project, I believed I knew what his next sentence would be. Victor was 52, the president of North Star Media, a man who always appeared wearing an expensive watch and speaking in a voice trained to sound sincere under any circumstances. He placed my performance review on the table, 3 consecutive years of outstanding evaluations, and pushed it aside as though it were nothing more than a scrap of paper. "Maya," he began, "you are the most dedicated person I have ever worked with." I nodded. "Your post-production skills are rare. Honestly, I don't think anyone in this building can do what you do." I kept nodding, and in that moment, I genuinely believe those compliments were leading to something good. That was my mistake. I later understood a rule I should have learned long ago. When someone lists everything you are good at before delivering the next sentence, that next sentence will always begin with the word but. But for the executive producer position, Victor said, we need someone who can become the face of the project, someone who can stand in front of investors, the media, and our distribution partners. You do excellent work behind the scenes, Maya, but this role requires someone who can represent the project as a whole. He paused, then added the sentence I would replay in my head hundreds of times afterward. You don't have the leadership presence this position requires. Leadership presence. As he said those two words, my mind automatically replayed a different set of images. The nights I slept on the editing room couch because the cut had to be finished by 8 the next morning. The emails Derek sent after midnight asking me to take a quick look at a presentation he would deliver the next morning. Presentations I ultimately rewrote almost in their entirety. The revision history of every timeline file in the system, where my account name appeared on the final line again and again, month after month. I had presence. I had simply never been allowed to use it where anyone could see it. So, Victor concluded, the executive producer position on Predators at the Edge will go to Derek. I turned my head to the right. Derek Shaw, 33, director of content development, and my younger sister's husband, was leaning back in a gray velvet chair at the far end of the table. He was wearing a brand new navy suit. He did not look surprised at all. That was the first detail that told me something was wrong. No one receives a major promotion without showing at least some surprise. Derek had known in advance, and in the few seconds of silence that followed, as I looked at him and he looked back at me with the smile I had once believed was friendly, I understood that this meeting had never been a fair evaluation. The decision had been made before I entered the room. This was not simply a staffing decision. Derek pushed back his chair, stood, and walked around the table. He stopped beside me and placed his hand on the binder I had brought. The binder I had spent 2 weeks preparing for the position he had just been given. He did not pick it up. He simply rested his hand on it, like a man placing his hand on something that already belonged to him. "Don't worry, Maya," Derek said, his voice so gentle that everyone else in the room must have mistaken it for kindness. "I still need you to stay and handle the technical side." The technical side. 3 years of my work had just been renamed in front of me, in a room full of people, and not one person spoke up. But that was not what I would remember most about that morning. What I would remember was the object Derek pulled from his pocket as he said it, something whose true meaning only I understood. Victor's assistant brought the appointment documents into the room, placed them in front of Derek, and turned to the final page. Derek picked up the fountain pen he had just pulled from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The barrel was jet black, the cap silver, with a tiny scratch near the clip. A scratch from the summer 3 years earlier, when the pen fell onto the tile floor in Lauren's kitchen during the party celebrating his new job. I remembered that scratch because I was the one who bent down and picked up the pen. It was the pen I had bought for him. The pen cost $480. I bought it at a store on Wilshire Boulevard on a Friday afternoon right after I got paid. Now that pen was being used to sign the decision, giving Derek the position that should have been mine. Derek signed his name. His strokes were slow, almost theatrical. Then he snapped the cap back on, click, and set the pen on the table, right beside the binder I had brought. To understand why that tiny sound sent a chill down my spine, you need to know where that pen came from. 3 years earlier, Derek had been unemployed for 7 months. He had left a small advertising agency after losing its largest client account, and no one else would hire him. Lauren had been married for only a year at the time. They were making payments on their house in Pasadena and had started selling their belongings to keep up with the bills. One night in March, Lauren called me just before 11. My younger sister cried on the phone for 40 minutes. She said Derek had stopped leaving the bedroom. She said she was afraid their marriage would not survive another 6 months. Then Lauren said the sentence I had heard in different forms my entire life. "Maya, you're the only one who can help." At the time, North Star had an opening in content development. I was not in charge of hiring. But I had something else. Something that in this industry can sometimes be worth more than hiring authority. I had credibility. By then, I had been at North Star for 4 years, had saved 3 projects from cancellation, and had never referred anyone for a job. So when I knocked on Victor's door and told him I was personally vouching for this candidate, he asked only one question. "Are you sure, Maya?" I said I was. I put my own professional reputation on the line for a man I had never worked with. Derek was hired after 2 rounds of interviews. The celebration took place that weekend at Lauren's house. I brought the pen in a velvet box, along with a handwritten card. "Congratulations on your new beginning." Derek opened the box, lifted the pen, turned it beneath the kitchen light, and told everyone in the room that he would use it to sign his first major contract. My mother applauded. My father said Derek was going places. No one asked how Derek had gotten into North Star. That was the detail I only recognized years later. In my family, everything I accomplished was treated as a given, while everything Derek received was treated as proof of talent. The first problem surfaced 6 weeks after he started. Derek submitted a content proposal to a Canadian partner and mistook a low-quality preview file for the original distribution master. Because of that mistake, he promised an image quality North Star did not have the right to provide. If the partner discovered it, North Star would lose the contract, and Derek could lose his job after only 6 weeks. He called me at 11 that night, panicked. I stayed up until 4 in the morning rewriting the entire proposal, rebuilding the technical specification sheet, and submitting the corrected version under his name. I did it because I imagined Lauren's face if her husband got fired after only 6 weeks. That was the first time. Then came the second, the fifth, the 12th, the midnight emails, the text messages that began with, "Maya, can you take a look at this for me?" The presentations I rewrote from scratch, which he delivered the next morning and received approving nods and praise for his sharp strategic thinking. And somewhere along the way, something changed before I realized it. The times I helped Derek stopped being help in his eyes. They became an obligation. By his second year, Derek no longer asked. He simply forwarded files to me with the note, "Need by 9." By his third year, he had begun describing my work to other people in a very particular way. A way that made everything I did sound mechanical and everything he did sound creative. In the screening room that day, after setting the pen on the table, Derek repeated that exact idea in front of the entire leadership team. "You're very good at finding the right clips, Maya. I'll handle the creative and strategic side." Finding the right clips. 11 international licensing agreements that I had personally negotiated with cinematographers in Kenya, Botswana, and India, all reduced to finding the right clips. I stared at the pen lying on the wooden table. In that moment, the way I saw Derek changed completely. I did not get angry. Anger would have been too easy for them to turn into evidence that I was bitter, unprofessional, and unfit for leadership. Instead, I began to see the entire truth clearly. The appointment documents had been prepared before the meeting began. The decision to give Derek the position had already been made. Then I remembered my mother's phone call the night before. I had been sitting in my living room, reviewing my executive producer presentation one last time. She called at 9 that night, asked no questions, made no small talk, and went straight to a subject she should have had no reason to know about. Her voice had been unusually urgent. And the thing she said to me that night was something I had deliberately dismissed until the moment I sat in the screening room and heard Derek's name announced. At 9 the night before, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I was sitting on the living room floor, my laptop open on the coffee table, reviewing my executive producer presentation for the 4th time. The final slide was the international release roadmap, which had taken me 2 weeks to build. I answered and wedged the phone between my shoulder and my ear. "Maya, I need to talk to you about tomorrow." I stopped typing. The appointment meeting was internal North Star business. It had not been announced. It was not on the general calendar. Across the entire company, the number of people who knew exactly what the next day's meeting was about could be counted on one hand. My mother did not work in media. She was a retired elementary school teacher who lived in Pasadena and had never set foot in an editing room in her life. "What's happening tomorrow?" I asked, and I could hear myself trying to keep my voice normal. "You know what I'm talking about." I closed my laptop. "Where did you hear about it?" Lauren told me, "That isn't important." She paused. "What matters is that you think very carefully before you do anything that puts the family in an awkward position." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean puts the family in an awkward position?" And then my mother said what she had called to say. Don't compete with Derek. I stayed quiet long enough for her to fill the silence with reasons that had already been prepared, and that was what I realized in that moment. They had been prepared. She was not improvising. She was reading from a list. Lauren was pregnant. Her doctor said her blood pressure was a little high and she should avoid stress. She and Derek had just put a deposit on a new house in Glendale, and their loan application was waiting for bank approval. Derek's current salary did not meet the bank's requirements. If he got the promotion, his new income would make their application qualify. I understand, I said. You're telling me the bank needs Derek to get promoted? I'm telling you Lauren needs this more than you do. I heard the speakerphone click on, slippers moving across hardwood, and then my father's voice appeared. Thomas Bennett, a man who had avoided every difficult conversation his entire life, but always spoke at the very end to support my mother. Maya, my father said, family isn't always about calculating who deserves something more. I sat there on the living room floor, my closed laptop containing 3 years of my work beneath my hand, and listened to my father tell me that merit was a concept that should not be used. You're single, my mother continued. You have your own apartment, your own company, that wild frame thing. You aren't lacking anything. Lauren is about to have a baby. Wild Frame Archives. She could not even remember its full name. But she remembered very clearly that it existed, and that its existence could be used as a reason I did not need anything else. This was not the first time my family had asked me to give up an opportunity for Lauren. When I was 15, I earned a place in a summer documentary filmmaking camp in Colorado. The tuition was exactly the amount Lauren needed for dance lessons that year. My mother sat on the edge of my bed and explained that I was stronger, that I would have other opportunities while Lauren was fragile and needed encouragement. When I was 23, I lent Lauren my savings so she could pay off her credit card debt. Lauren never repaid me. No one in the family ever mentioned it again, not even once. And now, at 35, I was sitting on my own floor, listening to my mother explain why I should give up my own film too. No, I said. One word. I did not even raise my voice. There was silence on the other end. I think it was the first time in years that my mother actually had to stop and process an answer from me. What did you say? I said no. I worked on that film for 3 years. I am not stepping aside from my own position so Derek can qualify for a bank loan. And then she said the sentence I would carry with me for weeks. The sentence that made me understand she did not see my work as something worth protecting. You always make everything about you. About me. She had just called 3 years of work on the film something I was making about myself. I told my mother I had to prepare for the next day, and I ended the call before she could answer. Something I had never done in 35 years. That night, I still tried to believe my mother was merely worried about Lauren and did not truly understand what was happening at North Star. But the next morning, when Victor announced Derek's name, Derek's calm expression told me the call had not been advice. It had been a campaign to force me aside before the meeting began. My family already knew the outcome. They had not called to ask me to consider anything. They had called to make sure I did not cause trouble over a decision that was already final. The only question left was, who at North Star had told Lauren? In the screening room, I looked back. Victor was adjusting his cuff, satisfied like a man who had just completed the hardest part of his morning. Derek was holding the pen, turning it between 2 fingers. And Victor's assistant had just placed a second document on the table, a document no one had mentioned until then, and that had not appeared on the meeting agenda. The first page read, Update to Project Footage Library Management Authority. I read the title twice, then looked at the final page. The space for my signature was still blank. They wanted to give Derek approval authority over every decision involving the footage library, and they were waiting for me to agree. Victor's assistant pushed the document toward me, turned it right side up, and placed a ballpoint pen beside it. Not the fountain pen. The fountain pen was for the person signing the appointment. I was given a blue plastic ballpoint, the kind found in every conference room drawer in the building. It's just a formality, Maya, Victor said, to keep everything clear during the transition. I turned the first page, then the second. Then I began reading more slowly, because by the third page I realized this document had not been written the night before. Lawyers had drafted it. It cited specific clauses and even included an internal project code. Here's what it said, translated into ordinary language. Clause 1, Derek Shaw, in his capacity as executive producer, had authority to approve and coordinate all uses of footage within the project. Clause 2. I would continue to handle all post-production work. Clause 3. Every communication between me and the contributing cinematographers had to go through Derek. Clause 4. North Star's proposed credit list had to be approved by the executive producer before it was submitted to the distributor. I read Clause 4 twice. Then I looked around the room and saw something that made the document's real purpose clear. No one was looking at me. Not because they were embarrassed. No one appeared surprised by the terms I had just read. This was not a meeting to consider options. This was a meeting to force me to accept a decision that had already been made. And in that moment, I realized I had been asking the wrong question all morning. I had been asking, why didn't they choose me? The right question should have been, why did they need me to stay so badly? Because if I truly was nothing more than the person who found the right clips, they would not have needed a 4-clause document to keep me doing all the work under Derek's authority. I set the document down. I did not sign it. Instead, I asked Victor one question, a very short, very technical question, the kind of question someone who supposedly lacked leadership presence should not have known to ask. Victor, does North Star intend to execute the final distribution license with Wildframe? The room went silent for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, I can assure you, is a very long time when 11 people are sitting in the same room. I saw Victor blink, just once. But I had worked with images for 12 years, and my job was to notice the instant a face changed. I looked at Derek, too. And Derek, the man who had just been given authority to approve footage use for the project, looked at me as though he did not understand what role Wildframe played in the film. That was when I knew for certain. Derek did not understand what he had just been given authority to manage. We'll handle the paperwork later, Victor said, recovering his normal cadence faster than I expected. Right now, you need to focus on supporting Derek. Paperwork. To understand the weight of that word, I need to explain something. And I will explain only half of it here, because the other half is what produced 87 missed calls on my phone 3 days later. Wildframe Archives was a company I founded 4 years earlier. At first, it was little more than a name I used to contract with freelance cinematographers I knew in Kenya, Botswana, and India. People North Star could never have reached because North Star did not know them, and they did not trust North Star. They trusted me. The critical licensing agreements for Predators at the Edge had all been executed through Wildframe, and the final distribution license, the document that would allow North Star to sell the film to Aurora Streaming, had never been signed. Victor knew. That was why he blinked. Derek did not know. That was why he sat there in silence. I looked at the document in front of me again. 4 clauses designed to ensure that the only person capable of signing that license remained in the editing room, while every decision had to pass through Derek. I did not argue. I had asked about the license, and Victor had chosen to treat it as paperwork that could be dealt with later. I no longer had any obligation to keep advising a company that had just handed control of my work to someone else. I reached up to my neck and removed my employee badge. It was the badge I had used to enter North Star every morning for 7 years. The photo had been taken when I was 28, with shorter hair and a face that still believed hard work was enough. I placed it on the table. I did not throw it. I did not slam it down. I placed it there, directly on top of the performance review Victor had pushed aside at the beginning of the meeting. I resign, I said, effective immediately. The entire room moved at once. Someone pulled back a chair. Someone said, Maya, wait. The head of human resources began a sentence about 2 weeks' notice, and I did not hear the rest. Victor stood. For the first time that morning, he lost the voice he had trained so carefully. You're overreacting. Sit down. I picked up my binder, the thick color-coded binder I had brought and spent 2 weeks preparing, and tucked it under my arm. I'm not overreacting, I said. I'm simply doing the very thing you all just said I wasn't capable of doing. I'm making a decision. Then I turned to Derek. He was still sitting there, the fountain pen between his fingers, his brand new Navy suit immaculate, the signed appointment document in front of him. I said the last words I would ever say to him inside that building. Good luck finishing the film you said you created. And I walked out of the room. On my way to the door, I heard exactly one sound behind me. It was not anyone calling me back. It was the fountain pen falling onto the wooden table. Because in that moment, for the first time since I had entered the room, Derek was no longer smiling. The threat in the editing room. My desk was in the corner of the fourth floor editing room beside the window, a spot no one had wanted 7 years earlier, because the afternoon sun shone directly onto the monitor. I began packing. There was not much. A ceramic mug, 2 field notebooks, a small framed photo of Lauren and me when I was 20, standing outside our parents' house, a mechanical keyboard I had bought myself because the company-issued keyboard made my wrists ache after 8 straight hours of editing. I packed very slowly, and I noticed that my hands were not shaking at all. That surprised even me. Then the editing room door flew open. Derek came in without knocking, his face red and his tie loosened at the collar. He marched straight to my desk and stopped in exactly the spot where everyone seated in the 3 surrounding rows could not help but hear him. "What are you doing?" I kept placing the notebook in the box. "I'm packing my personal belongings." "You just humiliated the entire family. Do you understand that? What are Evelyn and Thomas going to think? What is Lauren going to think?" That was the first thing he chose to say to me. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Are you okay?" His first concern was what the family would think. "Go back to the conference room and sign that document," Derek said, lowering his voice into what he probably believed was a persuasive tone. "Victor is just trying to apply pressure. He doesn't really intend to control all your work. This is how people operate at this level, Maya. You aren't used to it because you spend all your time in the editing room." I looked up at him. "Did you read that document, Derek?" He hesitated. "I read it." "Then tell me what Clause 3 says." Silence. He did not know. He had just signed a document giving himself authority to approve footage use on an 8-episode project, and he had not read past the first page. Those 3 seconds of silence were enough to tell me Derek had never read the document. "This isn't a game," he said, changing direction. "Lauren and I already put down the deposit on the house. If I lose this position because you cause a scene, do you know what will happen to her and the baby?" Less than 30 minutes after receiving the title, Derek was already using the baby to pressure me. "You just told the entire conference room that you would handle the creative and strategic side," I replied. "So handle it." And at that exact moment, Victor appeared in the doorway. He did not lower his voice. That was the difference between Victor and Derek. Derek wanted to persuade me, while Victor wanted the entire fourth floor to hear what happened to anyone who dared walk out of his conference room. "Ms. Bennett," he used my last name for the first time in 7 years. "Before you walk through that door, I want you to understand exactly what happens next." The editing room went completely silent. 14 people and not a single keyboard moved. "I know every important production executive in this industry," Victor said. "I will tell them exactly what kind of person you are. Someone who abandoned a project midway because she did not get promoted." I closed the lid of the cardboard box. "And if Predators at the Edge misses its deadline by even 1 day because of what you did today, our legal department will sue you." I let him finish. "You need to understand why I did not respond to any of it. It was not because I was afraid. It was because, while Victor threatened me in front of 14 of his own employees, I was calculating something entirely different. At that moment, the most important thing was to distinguish clearly between property belonging to North Star and property belonging to Wildframe. I removed my personal laptop from the dock, my machine, purchased with my money and registered to Wildframe Archives. I removed 2 Wildframe backup drives from the drawer. They were not connected to the internal system and contained no data owned by North Star. I left behind every company-issued computer, monitor, and storage room key. I arranged them neatly in a row on the desk. I did not delete a single file. I did not alter a single line. I did not touch any North Star system. That detail later became the most important fact in the entire story when the matter reached the lawyers. Then, right there in front of Victor and Derek, I opened my laptop and drafted an email. Not a personal email. I sent it from the Wildframe Archives administrative address, copying North Star Legal, Victor, Derek, and Wildframe's own archive mailbox to create a time-stamped record. It was very short, and I wrote it in the language I had used for 4 years while working with cinematographers on 3 continents. 1. under the suspension provision applicable when usage rights are disputed in the licensing agreements, administrative access by North Star personnel to the original library, managed by Wildframe Archives, was temporarily suspended. 2. All existing low-resolution proxy files in North Star's internal system would remain unchanged and would not be withdrawn. 3. Delivery of original resolution master files was temporarily suspended until North Star's usage rights for each source were verified in writing. 4. No data owned by North Star Media had been deleted, altered, or damaged. I read it once more, then I clicked send. The entire process took less than 4 minutes. What did you just do? Victor asked. I just sent a notice, I said, closing my laptop. In my capacity as a representative of an independent licensing partner, not as an employee. Because as of 20 minutes ago, I am no longer a North Star employee. That was the moment I saw something very interesting on Victor Lang's face. He did not understand. Victor had prepared every tool for dealing with an employee who resigned: the employment contract, notice requirements, reputational threats, and the legal department. But my status as an employee and my status as Wildframe's representative were two different things. North Star had just allowed an employee to leave the building. At the same time, it had created a dispute with the partner managing the project's most important licenses. I lifted the cardboard box, tucked the laptop under my arm, and headed for the door. Behind me, in the second row of desks, I heard a computer mouse clicking repeatedly, then clicking faster. Derek had sat down at a workstation and opened the master library, probably to prove to Victor that I was bluffing. And on the screen, instead of the thousands of familiar thumbnails, appeared a message he had never seen in his 3 years there. Access reauthentication required. The elevator doors close. The distance from my desk to the elevator was about 40 steps. I had walked that route thousands of times in 7 years, in every morning, out every evening, and many times out at 3 in the morning, when the entire floor was lit only by emergency lights and the hum of servers in the storage room. This time, I walked it carrying a cardboard box. No one said anything. 14 people were in the editing room. I knew every one of their names. I knew who was getting divorced, who had just had a baby, and who was trying to transfer to another department. I had stayed late to fix edits for at least 5 of them, without credit and without telling anyone. Not one person stood up. 2 people looked at me and then down at their keyboards. One person, Priya, who had joined 6 months earlier and whom I had taught the entire media management workflow, had red-rimmed eyes. But she said nothing either. I did not blame them. After Victor's threat, no one dared stand up for me. But I would not forget it either. I pressed the elevator button with my elbow because both hands were full. While I waited, I heard footsteps behind me. Derek. He stopped about 10 feet away, and this time his voice was completely different. No condescension, no attempt at persuasion, not even anger. Maya, restore the access. I did not turn around. I just sent an email explaining the verification process. I don't need a process. I need you to open it right now. The elevator door slid open. I stepped inside, set the cardboard box on the floor, and turned to face him. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw something on Derek Shaw's face that I had never seen before. Not confidence, not arrogance, not a smile. Fear. He was not afraid because the film might miss its deadline. People do not go pale over a deadline. He was afraid for another reason, one I did not yet know, and would not discover for another 10 days. But in that moment, standing in the 4th floor elevator with a cardboard box at my feet, I registered his reaction. It told me Derek was afraid of something more serious than a delayed project. Have a good day, Derek, I said. And the elevator doors closed between us. I walked to the parking lot, placed the cardboard box on the back seat, got behind the wheel, and sat still for exactly 30 seconds. Then I took my phone out of my pocket. 4 messages had arrived in the previous 20 minutes. 1 from Victor, 1 from Human Resources, 2 from Lauren. I did not open any of them. I held down the power button, shut the phone off, and watched the screen go dark. Then I drove home in silence. No music, no radio. 40 minutes on the 110 in the middle of the morning. Slow enough for me to realize one thing. I had not cried. I kept waiting for it. It never came. When I reached my apartment, I did 3 things. First, I opened a bottle of red wine I had bought in February and kept in the cabinet for an occasion worth celebrating. I still was not sure that day qualified. I poured a glass anyway. Second, I changed out of my work clothes, hung the formal blazer in the closet, and put on an old t-shirt. Third, and the one that actually mattered, I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and went into the Wildframe Archives folder. Now, I need to tell you something I deliberately held back until this point. Walking out of North Star that morning looked like an impulsive decision. Anyone watching would have thought so. A woman denied a promotion, wounded pride, employee badge removed, straight out the door. But my ability to make that decision had been built 4 years earlier. 4 years earlier, I handled post-production on an elephant documentary in Botswana. We used footage from a cinematographer named Samuel Otieno. When the film was released, Samuel's name was missing from the credits. His licensing fee was paid 11 months late. And when he complained, the company's legal department told him he had no direct contract. He had worked through an intermediary contractor, so he had no standing to make a claim. I sat in the editing room reading that email and understood something. In this industry, the person who captures the images does not always control how those images are used, paid for, or credited. So I founded Wildframe Archives. At first, it was simply a small legal entity that allowed me to contract directly with freelance cinematographers and make sure they were paid on time and properly credited. But it had something North Star did not: relationships. Samuel introduced me to 2 other people in Kenya. Those 2 introduced me to a group in India. Over 4 years, Wildframe became the licensing intermediary for 23 cinematographers in 9 countries. People who would not sign directly with an American studio but would sign with me because I paid on time and put their names on the screen. When Predators at the Edge began, North Star needed high-quality wildlife footage it did not have the budget to shoot itself. They came to me. North Star approved Wildframe as an independent licensing partner, and every agreement was reviewed by its legal department before execution. I still paid every cinematographer the full agreed licensing fee, but Wildframe supplied footage to North Star at cost and charged almost no management fee. I did that because I still believed the company and I were on the same side. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with my unfinished glass of wine, I reopened the original agreement and carefully read every word of the clause I had cited in that morning's email. Section 7.3. The licensor may temporarily suspend delivery of original materials in the event of a breach of usage terms or a dispute concerning the scope of licensed rights until the matter is resolved in writing. I read it 3 times. That morning, Victor had given me a document granting Derek authority to approve every use of footage in the project, while requiring all communication between me and the cinematographers to go through him. But North Star had not amended its licensing agreement with Wildframe or verified whether that new structure fell within the scope of the rights already granted. That was why a dispute now existed over the scope of use. I had sabotaged nothing. I had simply exercised a clause North Star had signed after it changed the way footage would be managed without first addressing the licensor's rights. I closed the laptop. Then I did something I still consider the smartest decision I made in this entire story. I picked up my phone, still powered off, walked into the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and placed it inside. Then I closed the drawer. I gave myself 72 hours, 3 days, no personal email, no text, not a single phone call. Wildframe's administrative address remained active. Every licensing request had to be submitted in writing, and the system automatically confirmed that it would be reviewed under the contractual process. I did not cut off the official channel of communication. I simply did not give Victor, Derek, or my family the opportunity to call me directly and drag me back into the role of fixing everything for them. Not because I was sulking, but because if I kept answering the phone, I would do exactly what I had done for 7 years: respond at midnight and solve problems that were no longer my responsibility. The only person who could stop me from rescuing them again was me. So I left the phone in the drawer. At the same time, 11 miles away on the 4th floor of North Star Media, Derek Shaw was sitting at a workstation in the empty editing room. Unable to access the master library, he opened the episode 1 timeline to see whether the edit still worked. The low-resolution proxies remained on the internal server, but the Episode 1 timeline linked directly to the master files in Wildframe's library. The timeline loaded. The audio layers appeared normally. Narration normal, music normal. Then the first frame appeared on the preview monitor. Not the mother cheetah beside the dry riverbed. Only absolute black with 2 white words in the center. Media offline. The next 3 days were the quietest I had experienced in years. I will tell you about them in the exact order they happened, because that is what I actually did. And while I do, keep another image in mind: the 4th floor of North Star Media, where everything was moving in the opposite direction. What happened at North Star during those 3 days, I later learned from Priya, Marcus, and the email chain entered into the legal record. Day 1. I slept until 9 in the morning. That may sound trivial, but you need to know that during the 3 years I worked on Predators at the Edge, I could count on one hand the number of times I slept past 7. I got up, made coffee, and ran 6 kilometers around the lake at Echo Park. It was April, with gentle sunlight. I ran slowly, stopped twice, and had nowhere I needed to rush. At North Star, at 8:30 that morning, Derek called the entire post-production department into a conference room. He issued the first directive of his career as executive producer. I know the exact words because Priya later repeated them to me. Just relink the media. It's only a file path issue. Relink the media. In editing, when a file loses its connection, you can point the software to the file's new location. If the file still exists somewhere the system can access, the process takes less than a minute. But it works only if the original file remains in a location the system is authorized to access. By 10 that morning, a technician named Marcus identified the problem and emailed Derek. The explanation was simple. The master files were not in North Star's system and never had been. They were stored in Wildframe Archive's repository behind an authentication layer, and the paths in the timeline were merely pointers to a location North Star could no longer access. There were no master files inside North Star's system to relink. All that remained were the low-resolution proxy files. Day 2. I went to the farmer's market in Silver Lake. I bought tomatoes, a bunch of basil, and fresh salmon. For the first time in months, I cooked a real dinner. I ate at the table instead of in front of a screen. That afternoon, I read 2/3 of a book I had bought the year before. At North Star, Day 2 was when the problem stopped being merely technical and became a risk that the company might be unable to deliver the film. Someone suggested using the proxy files as a temporary solution. It sounded reasonable. Proxies are low-resolution copies of master files used during editing to reduce the load on the computer. I had left every proxy intact in their system. I had stated that explicitly in Clause 2 of my email. The problem was that the project's proxies were only 960 pixels wide. Aurora streaming required 4K delivery. They could scale a proxy up to a 4K frame, but they could not turn it into a compliant 4K master. Details discarded during compression could not be restored intact. On a large review screen, the image would look soft, break apart in the details, and fail Aurora's quality control review. By the afternoon of Day 2, they tried another approach, locating a high-quality copy somewhere else. And they found one shot: the mother cheetah beside the dry riverbed, the opening shot of the trailer, the image Victor always showed off to investors. A 4K copy sat in a temporary storage folder from an internal review in January. They eagerly dropped it into the timeline, and across the image appeared a faint line of text running diagonally through the center of the screen. Wildframe Archives. Preview only. Not for distribution. A watermark. It was a watermarked 4K review copy, not a clean master licensed for delivery to a distributor. Every review copy we sent out carried a watermark. It was a standard procedure I established in the first year, precisely so no one could accidentally release an unlicensed version. Derek stared at the words on the screen and asked a question Marcus later repeated to me in a voice that still sounded disbelieving. Can we remove that text? Day 3. In the morning, I ran 8 kilometers. In the afternoon, I sat on the balcony and finished the book. That night, I went to sleep at 10. My personal phone remained in the drawer. I did not turn it on once. But Wildframe's administrative inbox remained active and continued recording every formal written request. At North Star, day 3 was when everyone confirmed that the real problem had never been merely offline files. While reviewing the project for replacement footage, the legal department had to reopen the licensing records for the entire film. At that point, they were forced to confirm in writing the scope of the problem Victor had dismissed in the conference room. They confirmed 3 things. First, 11 primary footage sources in the film had been licensed to North Star through Wildframe archives, not directly from the cinematographers. Second, the existing license allowed North Star only to access, create test edits from, and use the material during development of the film. It did not yet include commercial distribution rights. Third, and the fact that silenced the entire fourth floor. The 90-second trailer North Star had sent to Aurora Streaming had been incorporated into internal launch marketing materials. 4 shots in the trailer had been licensed only for editing and evaluation. They had not been cleared for promotion or distribution. In other words, North Star did not have sufficient rights to complete the sale and distribution of the film. Derek was ordered to explain himself at an emergency meeting that afternoon. He could not answer 3 basic questions. Question 1. What footage could replace the critical shots? He did not know because he had never reviewed the entire archive of raw footage. I maintained a separate tracking sheet that listed an alternative for every critical shot. Question 2. Who had granted the rights for each shot? He did not know. I knew the rights holder for every source because I had negotiated with each one personally. Question 3. Why did different clips have different terms of use? He did not know. Some clips could appear in an episode but not in advertising. Some required credits in a specific format. Some were licensed only for a limited period. Some required separate approval before inclusion in a trailer. Every contract was in North Star's legal files. But the tracking sheet showing where each shot could be used, within what scope and with what credit, was a document I updated every day. Derek had access to that document. He had simply never learned how to read it. For 3 years, Victor and Derek had called that work the technical side. It was not merely the technical side. It was the rights system that allowed the film to be edited, promoted, and distributed legally. They had forced out the person who understood that system, and only then realized no one else knew how to handle each individual shot. At 4 in the afternoon on day 3, an email arrived from Aurora Streaming's content department, addressed to Victor Lang and copied to both legal teams. The email remained polite, but its meaning was unmistakable. Aurora was preparing to suspend the deal. Aurora required North Star to produce a complete chain of title, the records proving North Star had valid rights to use and distribute every source of material in the film for all footage across the 8 episodes. The records had to be delivered before the legal review scheduled for the following afternoon. Deadline, 24 hours. Without them, the distribution agreement would be suspended. At that same moment, 11 miles away, I was asleep. And in my nightstand drawer, a phone that had been powered off for 72 hours was about to be turned back on. And with that, we are back exactly where this story began. The morning of day 4, 7:15. I opened the nightstand drawer and took out my phone. I held down the power button. The logo appeared. The screen lit up. Then, for about 15 seconds, the phone vibrated so continuously that I had to set it on the table to keep it from slipping out of my hand. 87 missed calls, 126 text messages, 14 urgent emails. I poured coffee first. Then I sat down and scrolled through the entire chain of notifications in chronological order. It took only a few minutes to realize the most interesting part was not the wording of any one message. It was the way the tone changed. Stage 1, orders. The messages from day 1 were written in the voice of people who still believed they held the upper hand. Victor, 10:42 a.m. Ms. Bennett, restore access today. Human Resources, 11:15 a.m. Ms. Bennett, please respond so we can complete your separation paperwork and confirm company property. Derek, 2:30 p.m. Maya, stop overreacting. Open it back up, and then we'll sit down and talk. Not one person asked why I had done it. Not one person mentioned the email I sent, the one that stated the verification conditions in 4 short lines. They did not need to understand. They only needed me to comply. Stage 2, threats. By the end of day 1, the tone shifted. Victor, 6:50 p.m. This is deliberate sabotage. Our legal department is preparing a case. At 8:12 p.m., an in-house North Star attorney sent a 3-paragraph email about the obligations of former employees, citing 2 provisions in my employment agreement. I read that letter most carefully. It told me one thing with precision. By the evening of day 1, North Star's legal department was still treating me primarily as a former employee. They had not yet fully confronted the fact that this was also a dispute between North Star and an independent licensing partner. Stage 3. Accusations. On day 2, my family joined in. My mother, 9:20 a.m. "You're doing this to get revenge on Lauren, aren't you? I don't recognize you anymore." Lauren, 11:05 a.m. "Maya, what you're doing is going to destroy my family. I'm pregnant. Do you understand what you're doing?" My father, 1:40 p.m. One message: "I'm disappointed in you." After 35 years, those words could still make me stop the same way they always had. I sat at the kitchen table, read them over and over, and allowed myself to feel them for a while. Then I set down the phone, stood, poured more coffee, and remembered that in all 3 days, not one person in my family had asked the simplest question: "What happened to you?" They knew Derek had lost access. They did not ask why I had resigned. That said everything that needed to be said. Stage 4, negotiation. On the morning of day 3, the tone changed again. Victor, 9 a.m. "Maya, I think there has been a misunderstanding. I would like to invite you back with a more appropriate title and salary. We can discuss credit." We can discuss credit. 3 days earlier, Clause 4 had placed approval of the credits in Derek's hands. Now Victor was using that same issue as a bargaining chip. Derek, 11:30 a.m. "I'm willing to share the executive producer title. Co-EP. Your name can even appear before mine." I read that message and laughed out loud, the first time I had laughed in 3 days. He was offering me half of a title he had not been capable of holding for 72 hours. Stage 5, pleading. By late afternoon on day 3, the tone finally became pleading. Victor, 5:15 p.m. "Maya, please call me back anytime. I will answer." Derek, 7:48 p.m., a voicemail. The message I played at the beginning of this story. The trembling voice saying every important file was offline and they would lose the contract if I did not call back. But that was not the final message. The last message arrived at 6:32 that morning, 43 minutes before I turned on the phone. It was also from Derek, only 2 sentences. "Lauren is crying. Evelyn is on her way to your apartment." I read it again. Evelyn did not want to call me. She had left home and was coming to my apartment. I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 7:34 a.m. The message had been sitting there for more than an hour. And at that exact moment, as though the previous 3 days of silence had only been a running start for this, someone pounded on the door. Not a knock. 3 hard, decisive blows. The kind of pounding people use when they believe the person inside is obligated to open the door. I set my coffee cup on the table. I walked into the hallway. I did not hurry. My heart did not seem to beat any faster either, and that continued to surprise me. At the door, I looked through the peephole, and I saw 4 people filling the narrow hallway outside my apartment. My mother stood in front, her raised hand not yet lowered. My father stood half a step behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the carpet. Lauren stood to the left, one hand on her pregnant belly, her eyes swollen and red. And at the very back, leaning against the hallway wall in a wrinkled shirt with his tie gone, stood Derek. My entire family. 7:34 in the morning. I stood there for several seconds, my hand on the deadbolt, and realized something with perfect clarity. This was not a visit. They had not come to ask whether I was all right. They had come to take back something they believed had always belonged to them. I unlocked the door and opened it. Derek was the first person inside. He did not wait to be invited. He pushed past my shoulder through the doorway, walked straight into the living room, and stopped in the middle of my home as though he had called the meeting. I left the door open and remained where I was, watching him. 3 days earlier, this man had sat in North Star's screening room in a brand new navy suit, turning a fountain pen between 2 fingers, and told me he would handle the creative and strategic side. The man standing in my living room wore a white shirt so wrinkled that a horizontal crease was visible across his back. No tie, 2 buttons open at the collar, 3 days of stubble, bloodshot eyes with dark circles so deep I could see them from 10 feet away. The phone in his pocket vibrated. He did not answer. It vibrated again, then stopped, then started again. Throughout the conversation that followed, it never went more than 2 minutes without vibrating. "Open the footage library again," Derek said. No greeting, no question about how I had spent the past 3 days. The first thing he said to me in my own home was an order. I closed the door. My mother, my father, and Lauren had come inside and stood together near the hallway entrance. No one sat down. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked. "I have coffee." "Maya," his voice cracked slightly on the final syllable, "we have less than 9 hours." "Less than 9 hours until what?" And then he began talking. Fast, out of order, the way someone speaks after 3 sleepless nights and too many rehearsals in his own head. He needed 4 things. First, I had to restore access to the archive. Right then, on that laptop, in that room, in front of him. Second, I had to call Aurora Streaming directly. He already had the number of the content executive. Third, and this is the part I need you to hear carefully, I had to tell Aurora the entire 3-day disruption had been caused by a server failure, a technical problem on the storage provider's end. There was no dispute over the scope of usage rights. There was no licensing issue. Fourth, I had to return to North Star and work under him until the first 3 episodes were delivered to Aurora. After that, he said, "We can discuss your future." I let him finish all 4 points. Then I asked one question. "Derek, do you know what your third request would be called in a legal record?" He frowned. "It would be a false statement about the film's rights status," I said. "You just asked me to provide false information to a partner in a major commercial distribution agreement, and you want me to make that statement in Wildframe's name." "It's just a way to smooth things over." "No, it's a way to make sure that if this comes apart later, my name is attached to the lie instead of yours." He fell silent. I was not sure Derek had considered that I would be the person held responsible for the lie. The phone in his pocket vibrated again. "Aren't you going to answer?" I asked. "It's Victor." "How long has he been calling?" Derek did not answer. I sat down in the armchair and asked the question I had waited 3 days to ask him directly. "Derek, you are the executive producer of that film. You were formally appointed in writing with your signature on the final page. So why don't you finish your own film?" The entire room went silent. I think it was the first time in 3 years anyone had asked him that question in those exact words. And his answer, I would remember it for a long time, because it showed me something I had still hoped I was wrong about. "Because you deliberately broke it," Derek said. In a single sentence, his voice shifted from pleading into something else. "You're jealous. You couldn't stand that I was chosen. So you cut off the system to prove no one can do anything without you. That's what this whole thing is, Maya. You're sabotaging my position." I looked at him. This man had brought my entire family to my apartment at 7 in the morning to beg me to save him. And even in the middle of begging, he could not stop himself from telling me the problem was my character. Derek was not pleading because he understood he had been wrong. He was pleading because he needed me to rescue him. The moment I refused, the arrogance returned. "All right," I said. "Then I will explain it one more time, very slowly." I took out my laptop, opened it, turned the screen toward him, and pulled up the licensing agreement between Wildframe Archives and North Star Media, signed by Victor Lang 3 years earlier. What I suspended was not North Star's system. North Star never possessed the master files. North Star has usage rights within the scope of the license, not ownership. Here is the clause. Here is the signature. Read it. He glanced at the screen for about 2 seconds. He did not read it. "I don't care about this paperwork," he said. "I care that Aurora will suspend the contract in less than 9 hours. "You don't care about the paperwork." I closed the laptop. "That is exactly why we are sitting here." Then I told him what I had considered very carefully during the past 3 days. The only correct answer. I will not restore access simply because you came here and demanded it. Maya, access will be restored only after North Star completes a valid distribution license for every source, agrees to commercial distribution fees with every rights holder, and commits in writing to the contractually required credits for the cinematographers whose images appear in the film. Everything must be in writing and handled through attorneys. not through a conversation in my living room at 7 in the morning. Derek stood there, clenching and unclenching his hands. "Do you know what you're doing to me?" "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I am requiring North Star to pay the proper fees for the rights it wants to use. That is the most ordinary thing in this industry. It only feels unusual because, for 3 years, Wildframe charged almost no management fee, and I personally handled the entire process for North Star." His phone vibrated again. This time he pulled it out, looked at the screen, and I watched his face turn white. He did not answer. He shoved it back into his pocket. And in that exact moment, when Derek had run out of arguments and stood in the middle of my living room like a man with nowhere left to retreat, I heard footsteps on the hardwood behind me. My mother stepped forward. She placed a hand on Derek's arm and gently moved him aside, exactly the way she used to move Lauren when we were children whenever she was about to deliver the final word. Then she looked directly at me, and her voice changed completely. "No more anger, no more accusations." She turned to my family's real weapon, the one that had never failed in 35 years. "Maya," my mother said, "this is no longer about work. This is about family. The mortgage and the baby. This is about family." In my house, those 4 words had never meant "we will solve this together." They had always meant, "now it is your turn to pay the price." My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, her back straight and both hands on her knees. She did not remove her coat. It was the posture of someone who had come to complete a task, not to stay. And she began making her case, in order, as though she had arranged every point in her head during the drive over. "Lauren is almost 20 weeks pregnant." I glanced at Lauren. My younger sister was leaning against the wall with one hand on her belly, and I noticed that hand was shaking. "The doctor says Lauren's blood pressure is high. Lauren should not be under stress. Do you understand what that means, Maya? At almost 20 weeks?" "I understand." "Lauren and Derek put a deposit on the house in Glendale, $45,000. If the loan does not close on time, that money could be lost." She paused, allowing the number to settle over the room. The loan application was updated to reflect Derek's new income. If Derek loses the position now, the bank may require another review. Lauren and Derek could lose the deposit, lose the house, and be left with additional debt while preparing for a baby. I sat quietly. I let her finish. Because I knew where she was going, and I wanted to hear her say it in her own words. "Maya," my mother said, lowering her voice, "you are punishing an unborn child." That was the sentence she'd come all the way to my apartment to deliver. In a single sentence, my mother turned North Star's decision into my fault, turned my protection of Wildframe's rights into an act of revenge, and placed an unborn child between us so that I could not object without appearing cruel. No one in that room mentioned that North Star had tried to force me to sign a document, granting Derek approval authority over footage while the master files remained under Wildframe's management. No one mentioned Victor threatening to destroy my career in front of 14 people. The only issue on the table was this: my licensing rights, my labor, and my savings needed to be used to rescue Lauren and Derek. My father spoke next. He remained standing with his hands in his pockets, speaking in the even tone I had heard for 35 years, the tone of a man who always believed he was neutral, when in reality, he was simply repeating the conclusion my mother had already written. "I think there is a way to make everything work out," he said. "It is very simple." Then he listed 3 steps. Step 1, I would call Victor Lang and apologize. He emphasized the word apologize as though it were a minor administrative formality. Step 2, I would return to North Star and work under Derek for 3 months, long enough to deliver the first 3 episodes to Aurora and stabilize Lauren and Derek's loan application. Step 3, after those 3 months, the family will forget this ever happened. I sat in the armchair in my own home and listened to my father propose that I apologize to the man who had denied my leadership ability, return to perform all the work under the person who had taken credit for it, and receive as my reward the family's willingness to forget the whole thing. Not apologize to me, not repair anything. "Forget?" I asked him one question. "Dad, what am I supposed to live on during those 3 months?" He blinked. I think it was the first question in their entire plan that no one had considered. "You have savings," my mother said. "Yes, I do. They are mine." "Exactly, you have them. That is what I am saying." And you see, she did not realize what she had just said. In my family system, having money was not a reason to leave me alone. It was a reason I was required to share it. Then Lauren began to cry. Lauren sat in the nearest dining chair, wrapped both arms around her stomach, and burst into tears. Maya, you have always wanted me to fail, Lauren said between sobs. I turned to look at her. Lauren, what did you just say? You have always been better than me. You did better in school, you have a better job, and you have your own company. Every time I'm about to get something, you prove to the whole family that I cannot do anything for myself. You like that, don't you? I sat there in my apartment at 8 in the morning and listened to my younger sister describe my life. In Lauren's version, my success was an act directed against her. I did not become angry. That surprised me again. I only felt tired. A fatigue that had existed for so long I had once believed it was normal. Lauren, I said, I have never wanted you to fail. I have simply never been allowed to succeed without paying a price for it. What is that supposed to mean? My mother answered for me. It means Maya is still angry about what happened when she was 23. The entire room went silent. I looked at my mother. What did you just say? The issue with your savings. She said it lightly, almost impatiently, like someone forced to revisit an old matter too insignificant to discuss. You kept that money for yourself while Lauren was being hounded by creditors. You think I don't remember? The whole family remembers, Maya. It has been 12 years, and you are still angry about it. I sat perfectly still, because that was not what had happened. It was not even close to what had happened. For 12 years, the version my family told one another was, Maya was selfish, Maya kept the money, Maya left Lauren to handle the problem alone. And I had never corrected it. Correcting it would have made dinner uncomfortable, and my lifelong assignment had been to make sure no one felt uncomfortable at dinner. I looked around my living room, my mother on the sofa, my father beside the window, Lauren crying in the dining chair, Derek leaning against the wall, his phone still vibrating in his pocket. 4 people who had finished constructing a story about me and lived inside it for so long that it had become their truth. I stood up. All right, I said. Since you brought it up, we are going to talk about it today. I walked to the kitchen table, picked up my laptop, and opened it. But we are going to talk about all of it, from the beginning. And I am going to tell the part no one in this family has been willing to hear for 12 years. I placed the laptop on the dining table, turned my chair to face all 4 of them, and sat down. When I was 23, I said, I worked 2 jobs. My mother tried to interrupt. I raised my hand. You just told your version. Now I am telling mine. You will listen until I finish. She closed her mouth. I think it was the first time in my life I had interrupted my mother, and she had actually stopped. During the day, I worked as an assistant editor at an advertising agency. The salary barely covered rent and basic living expenses. At night, I worked the overnight shift at a print shop from 10 at night until 3 in the morning, printing posters for bars. I did that for 14 months. What does that have to do with? It has everything to do with it. Keep listening. I opened the laptop, typed a few keys, and turned the screen toward them. I saved $4,200. This is the spreadsheet I made back then. I still have it. I plan to use the money to buy an editing setup, a computer, a color-calibrated monitor, and a RAID drive. I could not keep borrowing the agency's machines after hours forever. I looked directly at my mother. Then that September, the credit card company began calling Lauren about $6,800 in debt. And you called me. Lauren stopped crying. She was looking at me. You did not ask how much money I had. You said, sell the computer? You did not even know I had not bought it yet. In your mind, that computer was already something available to be liquidated. I never said that, my mother said. You did. I remember it exactly because I was standing in the print shop and had to step outside so I could hear you clearly. I paused. And I gave you the money. The room went silent. I transferred $4,200 into the account you sent me. Every dollar I had saved. I did not buy the computer. I borrowed another $2,600 from a friend to cover the rest of what Lauren needed, then spent the next 11 months repaying that loan. I opened the bank statement. Here is the transfer. Here is the $2,600 deposited into my account that same day. And here are the payments I made over the following 11 months. I looked at Lauren. You did not know any of that, did you? Lauren shook her head. Mom told me it was a loan I had given you, but she told you that she and Dad had taken care of the debt. I turned toward my mother. You knew. You were the person who sent me the account information and confirmed that the full amount had been received. My mother did not answer. What made everything clear was that she did not deny it. She only looked out the window. That was the first thing, I said. Now the second? I turned toward Derek. He was still leaning against the wall, and he had begun to guess what I was about to say. 3 years ago, you were unemployed for 7 months. You submitted 14 applications and did not receive a single interview. Maya, he said, do you know why no one called you? Because your resume was terrible. I know because I was the one who read it. I opened a folder on the laptop. I still have the file. It is named Derek_CV_V7_Maya.docx, version V7, which means there were 6 versions before it. I rewrote your entire experience section, rebuilt the structure, and wrote the cover letter. The version you submitted to North Star was the one I wrote. That's normal, my father said. Family members help one another. Yes, I agree. That is normal. I nodded. But 6 weeks after Derek started, I stayed awake until 4 in the morning, fixing the proposal he had sent to the Canadian partner with completely incorrect technical specifications. I looked at my father. 14 months later, I canceled a dental appointment to rewrite his pitch in 4 hours because a failed presentation could have cost him his job. Would you call that family helping family? My father did not answer. I searched every email and counted. Over 26 months, Derek sent me work after 10 at night 41 times, each with a deadline the following morning. I did not save those emails because I plan to use them. I saved them because I work in archives, and I archive everything. I opened another window. Now we have reached the part I think the whole family should hear. I turned the screen again so my parents could see it. 3 facts about the new executive producer of Predators at the Edge. Maya, that's enough, Derek said. I did not stop. First, in 3 years at North Star, Derek has never completed an edit of a full episode. Not an episode of this project, not an episode of any project. He does not know how to operate professional editing software at a professional level. Shut up. Second, the 90-second trailer he presented to the investment committee in November, the one praised for its outstanding cinematic vision. I edited it over 3 nights. I opened the trailer delivery email and the version history report exported from North Star's system before I resigned. My account is listed as the creator of the edit and the person who made the final revision. The delivery email also carries my name and a timestamp. Maya! Derek growled my name, and for the first time that morning, he stepped toward me. I did not stand. I did not lower my voice. Third, the idea of structuring 8 episodes around hunting seasons instead of species. The idea Aurora streaming bot. The idea that defines the entire film. Derek presented it at the February 17th meeting. I opened another email. I sent him that idea from my Wildframe address on February 11th, 6 days earlier. The email still has its original timestamp. I looked up at him. Would you like me to open the entire email chain, Derek? Right now, in front of Evelyn and Thomas? He was standing about 5 feet away. Derek did not deny it. He simply stood there with both hands clenched because he knew every statement I made had evidence behind it. Shut your mouth, he said, very quietly. No, I replied. I have been silent too long. Not today. I turned back to my parents. And now the third thing, the one I think everyone needs to understand most. I opened the licensing agreement. 3 years ago, North Star needed material for this project. They did not have the budget to shoot it themselves. They came to Wildframe, to me. I looked around the room. The cinematographers still received their full agreed fees, but Wildframe supplied the material to North Star at cost and charged almost no management fee. I did that because I believed the company and I were on the same side. I believed that if I contributed enough, eventually they would see me. I paused. That was my entire strategy during 7 years at North Star. Give so much that I became impossible to overlook. I looked around the room. 3 days ago, they sat in a room and told me I did not have what it took to lead, then handed me a document requiring me to confirm that Derek controlled approval of the credits. I closed the laptop. That strategy was wrong, not slightly wrong, wrong at its foundation. My mother spoke, but most of her earlier certainty was gone. Then tell North Star you want your name in the credits. They will put it there. What is the big deal? And that sentence opened the door to what I needed to say. Mom, I said, you still think I am an employee begging her boss for recognition? I stood. I'm no longer their employee. But even when I worked there, I never had only one role. North Star Media does not own Wildframe Archives. North Star does not own the original copyrights to the sources in that library. It has only the usage rights specifically granted in the agreements. I looked directly at Derek. I own Wildframe. I placed my hand on the laptop. The cinematographers own the images they created. Then I looked at my mother. And North Star has exactly the rights the contracts granted it. I paused. Nothing more. There was about 4 seconds of silence after I said that. Then my father laughed. Not mockingly, the laugh of someone who had heard something so absurd it did not deserve an argument. Maya, what are you talking about? You work in post-production. I used to work in post-production for North Star. I am also the owner of another company. Those two facts do not conflict. You don't have a company. I opened the laptop again, typed 4 keys, and turned the screen toward him. This is the certificate of formation. Wildframe Archives, LLC, registered in the state of California on June 19th, 4 years ago. This is the federal tax identification number. These are the tax returns for the past 3 years. My father looked at the screen. He could not read any of it. Not because the print was small, but because documents like that did not belong to his world. When did you do this? My mother asked. 4 years ago. Why didn't you tell anyone? That question made me pause. Mom, I did tell you 3 times. The first was at Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago. You asked how I was doing, and I said I had just started a small media archive company. You said, "Oh, that's nice," and then turned to ask Lauren about the wedding. She said nothing. The second time was Dad's birthday. The third was the day Lauren announced her pregnancy. I was going to tell everyone Wildframe had just signed its largest independent contract to date, worth 5 figures. But I decided not to because that day belonged to Lauren. I lowered the laptop halfway. I did not hide it. I simply was never the subject. Then I explained. Slowly, using the simplest language I could, because I genuinely wanted them to understand. Not so I could win, but because I knew that if they did not understand, they would continue pressuring me to do something impossible. Wildframe is an independent legal entity. It is not a North Star department, subsidiary, or asset. It has its own bank account, its own insurance, and its own accountant. The cinematographers grant Wildframe authority to manage and sublicense their material within the scope of each agreement. North Star is not a party to those agreements. What North Star has is a usage license. That means it may use the material for a particular purpose within a particular scope. Its current license is a production license. It allows North Star to access and edit the material while making the film. It does not yet allow North Star to commercially distribute that film through a streaming platform. I looked at Derek. And 3 days ago, Victor gave me a document requiring me to confirm that Derek had authority to approve footage use in the project, control communications with the cinematographers, and approve credits before submission to the distributor. I looked directly at him. But an internal North Star document cannot expand the scope of the license Wildframe granted. The executive producer title may give you internal approval authority within the project. It does not create a right to control the master library or Wildframe's contracts. Then what did you take away? My father asked. I did not take anything. That is the entire point. I opened the email I had sent 3 days earlier. I did not delete a single North Star file. I did not touch its systems. I left every edit, proxy, and piece of internal North Star data exactly where it was. I only suspended delivery of the master files Wildframe has the right to manage and license, in accordance with the contract, until the scope of usage rights is verified and the distribution license is completed. I looked around the room. A supplier may suspend delivery when a customer has not completed the conditions for payment and use. That is ordinary business. But when I exercised that right, the family called me a saboteur. All of you have always treated my company's labor and authority as an internal resource North Star could use whenever it wanted. My mother shook her head, and I saw an expression on her face I had never seen before. She was no longer angry. She was confused. For the first time, the facts on paper did not fit the role my family had always assigned me. But Derek was not confused. I turned toward him and saw what I had been waiting for all morning. His face had gone white. Derek did not ask another question, object, or demand to see the documents. That reaction made me understand that he had known Wildframe was an independent legal entity. He had known for a long time. And in the moment I said it in front of Evelyn and Thomas, what frightened him was not being exposed. It was that this story was moving toward a place he did not want it to go. You knew, didn't you, Derek? I don't know anything. You worked at North Star for 3 years. During that time, you signed 4 internal footage use requests. Wildframe appears on the licensor line of all 4. He did not answer. Then he changed direction, exactly as I had expected. You think you're so smart? Some firmness returned to his voice. North Star is going to sue you. That is not a threat. Legal has already started the file. Breach of duty of loyalty, damage to the project, interference with a commercial contract. Do you know how much a lawsuit like that costs? Enough to drain my savings before the case ever reaches trial. Then you know you cannot afford it. Correct, I cannot. I looked directly at him. But if North Star sues, the scope of the licenses, approval emails, access history, and every record concerning footage use may become subject to production. I paused. Do you truly want those documents examined under oath, Derek? He stood motionless. And one more thing, I continued. You will never work in this industry again. Victor already said that to me 3 days ago. Would you like to add anything? Aurora will see you as the person who destroyed the deal, he said. You think they will take your side? They invested substantially and scheduled a release for this project. You are the one bringing it down. In this industry, your name will become one no one dares put on a contract. Then he lowered his voice and moved to the part he probably considered his smartest argument. But if you cooperate, I can put in a good word for you. I am the EP. My opinion carries weight with Victor. I can present this as a technical problem, with no one assigned blame. You come back, deliver the 3 episodes, the matter ends, and your name stays clean. I looked at him for a long time. Derek, 30 minutes ago, you walked into my home and accused me of sabotage driven by jealousy. Now you are offering to protect my reputation. Do you not see that both statements cannot be true? He did not answer, and then I noticed a detail. Throughout that entire threat, one subject had been completely absent. He had not mentioned money. He had not asked what North Star would have to pay in licensing fees. He had not mentioned the budget, additional costs, or the price Wildframe required. That proved nothing by itself. But a person trying to save a major project without ever asking what it would cost was difficult to ignore. I began to think the Aurora contract was not the only thing Derek feared. I looked at him. Red eyes, wrinkled shirt, the phone vibrating in his pocket for what must have been the 20th time. And the question that had followed me since the elevator became clearer than ever. Someone facing the loss of an executive producer title would be worried. He would not turn white. He would not bring an entire family to my apartment at 7 in the morning. He would not ask permission to lie to a streaming platform. Derek was not merely afraid of losing the film. He was afraid the film would be examined. I opened the laptop again and began typing, not for anyone else to see. I opened the notes application and listed the 4 footage use requests he had approved, along with their dates and reference numbers. Because if years in post-production and media management had taught me one thing, it was this. When someone's panic is out of proportion to the apparent damage, there may be another file that has not yet been opened. You approved request number 4 last August, I said, still looking at the screen. I reopened the old note attached to the record. It listed a secondary recipient code that you described as a North Star post-production vendor. The internal request had all the required approvals and identified post-production as the scope of use. So, at the time, I had no reason to think you were lying. I looked up. Do you remember that request? That was when everything in the room changed. Derek took one long step toward the dining table. But he was not the first person to touch the laptop. My father, the man who had spent nearly an hour standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, suddenly stepped forward, reached across the table, and grabbed the edge of my laptop. "That's enough, Maya," he said. "Give this to me." I placed one hand on the laptop lid and held it down. "Dad, take your hand off it." "I only want to see what you have in there. Take your hand off my computer." He did not. And you need to understand this. In 35 years, that was a boundary I had never drawn with my father. He had never needed to test it because I had never possessed anything he wanted to take. Now I did, and his first instinct after discovering that fact was to reach across the table. "Thomas," my mother said, sounding slightly concerned, but she did not tell him to stop. Derek took 2 more steps. He stood at the end of the dining table near the box containing Wildframe's 2 offline backup drives. Both were encrypted, disconnected from every device, and marked with orange tape. I saw his eyes flick down toward the box. That was the moment the nature of the situation changed. With my father holding the laptop and Derek looking at the backup drives, this was no longer merely a family argument. They were reaching for property and data I had a duty to protect. I tightened my grip on the edge of the computer and pulled the laptop free from my father's hand. Then I did 2 things. First, I opened the apartment's security camera application. I had installed the system 2 years earlier after the building was broken into 3 times in 1 month. One camera was in the hallway outside the door, and another was in the corner of the living room above the bookshelf. Both recorded continuously and saved footage to the cloud. They did not record audio. I turned the screen so all 4 of them could see themselves in real time. "The cameras have been recording since you entered," I said. "The complete video of the conversation from the past 2 hours has been saved." My father removed his hand from the table. Derek also stepped half a pace away from the box of drives. I opened the voice recorder application on my phone. "From this point forward, I will also record the audio. You have all been informed." I pressed record. Second, I opened the 911 call screen and placed my finger over the call button. I did not press it. I simply held up the screen for them to see. "Now I am going to make one thing clear," I said. My voice was so calm that it surprised even me. "This is my apartment. I pay the rent with my money. This laptop is the property of Wildframe Archives, LLC. Those backup drives contain footage and licensing data that 23 cinematographers entrusted my company to manage." I looked at each person in turn. "You have 30 seconds to leave my home." "Maya," my mother began. 25. "You cannot speak to your parents that way." 20. Then Lauren rose from the chair. Lauren walked into the center of the room, one hand still on her stomach, her face wet with tears, and looked at me in a way I would remember for a long time. "Maya, you are a monster," Lauren said. I did not answer. Not because it did not hurt. It did. But because I knew that if I opened my mouth to defend myself, I would return to the exact cycle I had spent nearly 2 hours escaping. 15, I said. "You are destroying this family." My mother stood, picked up her purse, and her hand trembled. "Do you understand? You are destroying your own family with your own hands. Then you will sit alone in this apartment and remember today." "Maybe," I said. 10. My father walked toward the front door without looking at me. Lauren followed. At the threshold, she stopped and looked back, waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to do what I had done my entire life. Step forward, apologize, smooth everything over, keep it all intact. I did not step forward. Lauren left. Derek was last. He stopped in the doorway and turned to look at me. And in that moment, every trace of the man who had once sat in a leather chair, talking about the creative and strategic side, disappeared completely. "This isn't over, Maya." I held his gaze. "No," I said, "it isn't." I closed the door. I locked the upper deadbolt, then the lower one. Then I fastened the security chain, something I had not used once in 4 years in that apartment. Then I stood there with my back against the door in the sudden silence of a room 4 people had just left. And finally I cried, not because of the executive producer title, not because of the film, not because of Derek, Victor, or Aurora streaming. I cried because they had come to take my access, my work, and my silence. No one had come to understand me. I cried for about 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, made fresh coffee, and sat at the table. Because the crying was finished, and there was a great deal of work to do. I did 3 things over the next 2 hours. I downloaded all the security camera footage, saved it in an encrypted cloud folder, and copied another version into WildFrame's backup storage. I separately preserved the audio recording beginning at the moment I notified all 4 of them. I prepared a list of every email file and timestamp connected to the 4 internal footage use requests Derek had approved. I did not analyze them further. I only cataloged each document and its storage location so they could be examined without altering the original data. And I wrote an email to Naomi Reed. Naomi was the intellectual property attorney I hired 4 years earlier to draft WildFrame's first agreement. She was 45, specialized in media, and had advised me to keep Section 7.3 when I considered deleting it for simplicity. Under our advisory agreement, Naomi still had read-only access to WildFrame's contract repository and licensing ledger. I wrote her a 2-page email covering the meeting, the appointment document, my resignation, the suspension notice, North Star's threatening letter, and that morning's visit. I clicked send at 11:40 a.m. Then I took a shower, and for the first time in 3 days, I was genuinely hungry. I was standing in the kitchen chopping an onion when my phone vibrated once on the table. Naomi replied much faster than I expected, less than 40 minutes later, and her response did not read like a lawyer's email. No greeting, no thank you for contacting me, no summary of the situation, only 2 lines. Maya, do not restore any access for North Star until I have finished verifying this. Not even if they send a new license. I just found a highly unusual licensing transaction in the rights ledger. I stood still in the kitchen, the knife still in my hand, and read the second line again. I just found it. Not you should check, not there may be a problem. She had already seen it. And I realized that in the entire 2-page email I had sent, I had not even mentioned Derek's 4 footage use requests, which meant the transaction was not in any record Derek had allowed me to see. Naomi Reed asked me to meet her at her office at 2 that afternoon. Instead of her main office, Naomi chose a small conference room at the end of the hallway, one without a glass door facing reception. I noticed that detail as soon as I entered. In 4 years of working together, Naomi had never closed both sets of doors before a meeting. She was 45, her hair neatly tied back, wearing a gray blazer, and on the table in front of her were 2 things: a cold cup of espresso and a file nearly 1.25 inches thick, placed face down. Sit, she said. Maya, have you eaten anything? No. Eat something. The next part may take away your appetite. Naomi's assistant brought in a boxed meal, set it beside me, and closed the door. First, Naomi said, opening her laptop, I need you to hear the good news because you look like someone who has not slept for 3 nights. I slept fine. Then you look like someone who just threw her entire family out of her home. That part is true. She opened North Star's threatening letter, the 3-paragraph letter its legal department sent on the evening of day 1, and turned the screen toward me. I have reviewed this letter, the licensing agreement, your suspension notice, and the audit logs exported by the infrastructure provider under a preservation request. Naomi held up 3 fingers. Now I am going to explain your legal position in ordinary language. 1. You did not delete, alter, or move North Star data. The system logs show that your account did not affect a single internal North Star file. She touched the screen. Those logs are stored on third-party infrastructure, not on a device under your control. They are very strong evidence against any allegation that you directly sabotaged data. 2. You did not interfere with North Star property. You left its timelines, proxies, and internal data intact. What you suspended was delivery of master files WildFrame has the right to manage and license. Ownership and usage rights are different concepts, and the agreement distinguishes them very clearly. 3. Section 7.3 permits the licensor to suspend delivery of original materials when there is a breach of usage terms or a dispute concerning the scope of licensed rights. Naomi opened the document Victor had given me in the conference room. On April 19th, North Star asked you to confirm that Derek had authority to approve footage use in the project, control communication with the cinematographers, and approve credits before submission to the distributor. She paused. That document does not transfer ownership, But it shows North Star wanted to change who controlled footage use without amending its licensing agreement with Wildframe. That creates a genuine dispute over the scope of usage rights. Naomi took a sip of cold espresso. Derek's appointment as executive producer, by itself, would not have been enough to justify suspending the masters. The issue is the accompanying provisions and North Star's attempt to change the footage management structure without clarifying the licensor's rights. What about the document they wanted me to sign? Even if you signed it as a North Star employee, it would not automatically amend Wildframe's agreement. Naomi turned the screen toward me. To change the scope of usage rights, North Star and Wildframe would have to execute a valid amendment as two independent legal entities. I sat quietly for a moment. So I am all right. You are in a strong legal position. Naomi looked directly at me. But I am not saying North Star will not sue. A company can still file a claim even when its case is weak. What I am saying is that we have strong evidence to defend you. Honestly, if that dispute were the only issue, I would have sent you a short email and scheduled a conversation for next week. She placed a hand on the file lying face down on the table. But I asked you to come here immediately this afternoon. Because of the transaction you saw? Because of the transaction I saw. Naomi turned the laptop back toward herself and opened Wildframe's licensing ledger. After receiving your email, the first thing I did was search every transaction connected to North Star. I found a licensing transaction that did not match any agreement I had ever drafted for Wildframe. That is when you sent me the warning email? Yes. She opened another window. Then, under the Incident Response Authority in our advisory agreement, I instructed the infrastructure provider to preserve and export the audit logs from the previous 6 months. I wanted to determine where the transaction came from, who accessed the system, and whether any data had been altered. And I found a great deal that was unusual. Just not on your side. She turned the screen back toward me. Part 1, beginning on the afternoon of April 19th, after you sent the suspension notice, the system recorded 14 authentication requests from North Star Media's IP range, using 4 different accounts. They tried to get back in. Some requests may have been automatic connections from editing software searching for the old paths. Naomi scrolled down, but 4 were initiated through the administrative interface using specific user accounts. All 4 were denied. She looked at me. Those login attempts alone are not enough to establish anyone's intent. The next part is more serious. Naomi opened 3 adjacent log entries. On April 20th, the system received 3 bulk copy requests. Each targeted the entire master directory associated with predators at the edge. The total volume was approximately 40 terabytes. I set down my fork. Did any of them succeed? No, the system blocked them at the authentication layer. Naomi enlarged the field identifying the request method. But these were not automatic actions from editing software. The requests were manually created through an administrative tool and targeted the full directory structure. 3 times? 3 times, after North Star had received written notice that master access was suspended. She folded her hands on the table. That does not allow me to conclude immediately who performed the actions. But it is serious enough to be treated as an access incident and to trigger evidence preservation. And the third part? Naomi looked up at me. The third part is why I told you not to restore North Star's access until I completed my verification. She typed a few keys. On April 21st, someone attempted to alter the metadata of 7 files in the shared staging space. That space does not contain master files. It contains only previews, sidecar metadata, and delivery documents. North Star still had limited write access to support the post-production workflow. Specifically, someone attempted to change 2 fields, rights holder and source contract. I looked at her. They tried to change the owner's name. They tried to change the rights holder displayed in the metadata, Naomi corrected. That would not alter actual ownership or the real contract. But if successful, it could make a copy appear to come from a different licensing source. Did it work? No. Those 2 fields were locked at the administrative level. North Star could upload delivery files into the staging space, but it could not alter the source data in the rights fields. Naomi pulled the 7 file names onto the screen. And here is the important detail. Those 7 files were not in episode 1, were not in the trailer, and had nothing to do with the deadline for Aurora's first 3 episodes. Then what were they? That is exactly the question I spent the rest of the morning answering. Naomi closed the laptop. You can take comfort in one thing. Every attempt failed, and every request was recorded with a timestamp account and IP address. The provider created an immutable audit copy. From that point forward, no one could quietly alter or delete the logs. She pushed the espresso aside. Then she placed her hand on the file lying face down on the table and turned it over. Now I need you to hear the rest while you're sitting down. I looked at the file. The first page was a reconciliation table comparing Wildframe's licensing ledger, related invoices, and the payment codes recorded in the transaction files. One column contained dates, one contained amounts, and one contained the name of a company I had never heard of. Naomi looked at me. Maya, Derek did not only take your credit. Naomi turned the file around, pushed it across the table toward me, and began speaking in the voice I imagine lawyers use when they know the person across from them is about to need a moment to breathe. This meeting took place at 2 the following afternoon. Naomi had spent nearly a full day preserving logs, reconciling the rights ledger, and reviewing the documents attached to the unusual transaction she had found. The 7 files targeted for metadata changes led me to one question, Naomi said. Why those 7 files? She turned to the second page. So I traced each file backward, reviewed its usage history, and compared it with Wildframe's licensing ledger. Naomi placed a finger on a table, and I found 17 separate licensing transactions, each tied to one clip. Every transaction was presented in Wildframe's name, but none had been approved through the company's process or reviewed against the rights holder's terms. I looked up. Wildframe did not approve a single transaction on this list. I know, Naomi said. That is the problem. She turned to the customer summary. 17 transactions covering 17 clips allocated among 5 customers. Naomi read each group. A German automaker used 3 clips in an off-road SUV advertising campaign. An East African tourism authority used 5 clips in a promotional film. An energy drink brand used 4 clips. The remaining 5 clips were split between 2 content production companies. I looked at the list. I recognized every clip. The herd of antelope crossing a river at sunrise. Samuel filmed it in the Mara after waiting 11 days. The lion cub falling and then standing again. Angeles, a cinematographer in Gujarat. She once told me it was the shot she was proudest of in her career. Now those images were appearing in advertising without Wildframe's approval and without review under the cinematographer's contracts. Who signed them? I asked. Naomi turned to the next page and pointed to the final box on the contract template. My name was there. Maya Bennett, Rights Manager, Wildframe Archives, LLC. Below it was an image of my signature. I sat in silence for a long time. I did not execute that signature. I know, Naomi said. She placed a technical report beside the contract. The contract displays only the image of your signature and your title block. There is no digital signature certificate, no confirmation email, and no log showing that you opened or approved the document. I looked at the signature again. Where did they get it? You previously used Northstar's document system to process certain routine records involving both Northstar and Wildframe. The image of your signature and your title template remained in the template library. Derek had access to that library. His position allowed him to create documents and use existing templates. That authority did not permit him to sign for you, but technically, a person with document creation access could insert an image of your signature into a PDF without you performing any signing action. I looked down at my hands. They were cold. So to a buyer, it looked like a real contract. Yes, but there was more than the contract. Naomi turned another page. Each customer also received a letter appointing Silverline Creative LLC as Wildframe's collection agent, along with what appeared to be a complete set of payment instructions and vendor forms. Did those letters carry my name too? They carried Wildframe's name and displayed the same signature image. Naomi paused. We cannot yet determine the extent of each customer's due diligence, but most appear to have believed they were dealing with a collection agent authorized by Wildframe. Where did the money go? That was the question Naomi had been waiting for. She turned to the page with the company name I had never heard. Silverline Creative LLC. I have never heard that name. The company was registered in Nevada 16 months ago. with creative consulting listed as its business purpose. Naomi pointed to the corporate record. There is no website, no public client list, and no clear sign of business activity beyond the formation filing, a service address, and the receiving account listed in the contracts. Who is behind it? Nevada's records list Brandon Cole as Silverline's managing member. I closed my eyes. Brandon Cole. I had met him 3 times. At Lauren's wedding, at a barbecue in Pasadena, and once at a bar after an internal screening. Derek's best friend from college. Lauren's wedding best man. The paper structure is simple, Naomi said. The contracts claim to have been executed between Wildframe and the customer. The payment designation letters state that Silverline is an authorized collection agent. The customers paid Silverline. Wildframe received no money, and no transaction was recorded in the company's accounting system. How much in total? Naomi turned to the final page of that section and rotated it toward me. The total committed value of the 17 transactions was $650,000. I read the number 3 times. $650,000. That is the contract value, Naomi said. It is not the amount Silverline received in full. She placed 3 payment confirmations and a set of disbursement hold notices in front of me. After the chain of title was questioned, several customers provided payment receipts to their legal departments. The receipts currently available confirm that approximately $180,000 was transferred to an account in Silverline's name. And the rest? Approximately $470,000 remains unpaid. The customer suspended disbursement until the usage rights could be verified. To understand what that number meant to me, over 4 years of operation, Wildframe Archive's total revenue, everything before taxes, expenses, and payments to partners, was approximately $310,000. These fraudulent contracts had a total value more than twice my company's entire historical revenue. And during that same period, Wildframe continued paying the cinematographers their full agreed fees, while charging Northstar almost no management fees, because I believed I was building trust. Why was the remaining money being held? I asked. Naomi leaned back in her chair. This is the part you need to hear carefully. She flipped back several pages. In February of this year, the East African Tourism Authority held a premiere screening of its promotional film in Nairobi. Members of the press and several local filmmakers were invited. I began to understand before she finished the sentence. Someone sitting in the auditorium looked up at the screen, saw footage he had shot, and realized he had never authorized its use in a tourism promotional film. Samuel, I said. Samuel Otieno. Naomi placed an email chain in front of me. Samuel sent an inquiry to the rights contact address listed in the contract. The address used Wildframe's name, but messages were forwarded to an inbox controlled by Silverline. I looked at the chain. So I never received it. Correct. Samuel believed he was contacting Wildframe. Correct, Naomi continued. After he did not receive a satisfactory response, Samuel contacted the user directly. The customer's legal department requested the chain of title records. The customer then placed the contract, Silverline designation letter, invoice, payment receipt, and Samuel's correspondence into its internal review file. A copy of that file was attached to the transaction in the rights ledger I discovered. I sat silently. Samuel had tried to ask Wildframe, but the person who built the transaction had changed the contact channel, so his question would never reach me. So since February, I said slowly, approximately $470,000 has remained unpaid. Yes. And to release that money, they have to prove every transaction was validly approved by Wildframe and the underlying rights holders. Yes. But none of the transactions was approved. None of the first 16 files contains evidence of valid approval by you or through Wildframe's process. That was the moment everything began fitting together. I sat in the closed conference room at Naomi's office, the boxed meal almost untouched in front of me, and finally understood why Derek needed me to sign the document in Northstar's screening room. The appointment was not only about the film. The 4-clause document required me to confirm that Derek had authority to approve footage use in the project, control communications with the cinematographers, and approve credits before submission to the distributor. The executive producer title could not make fraudulent transactions legal. It also could not authorize Derek to sign on behalf of Wildframe or the owners of the footage. But if I signed a document confirming that structure, Derek would have another piece of paper creating the appearance that I had accepted his control over footage use. He could use it to pressure Wildframe into retroactively confirming the transactions, or to make customers believe his authority was broader than it actually was. And the clause requiring every communication with cinematographers to go through Derek would make it difficult for me to contact rights holders who might uncover the misconduct. He needed me sitting quietly in the editing room, I said. And he needed me not speaking directly with Samuel. Naomi nodded. Standing alone, North Star could describe that clause as an administrative measure. She touched the file. But placed beside the fraudulent contracts, the forwarding mailbox, and the metadata change attempts, it also had the effect of isolating you from the people who could discover what was happening. I pushed the food container aside. Naomi, legally, where am I in this? She did not answer immediately, and that silence told me the answer could not be contained in the word find. For the first 16 transactions, Naomi said, the current evidence strongly supports the conclusion that you were impersonated. There is no log showing you approved the documents. You received no money. The funds were directed to Silverline, and the contracts used only an image of your signature, without your electronic authentication. But that does not mean no one will question you. Naomi looked directly at me. It means we have a clear defensive record. What about the 17th transaction? Naomi removed a separate sheet from the file. It had been clipped apart from the other pages. I immediately understood that she had separated it the night before. The 17th transaction differs from the other 16 in 3 ways, Naomi said. If this matter is reported to investigators, it will be the first transaction that makes them ask whether you participated in it or knew about it. She placed the paper on the table and turned it toward me. Maya, you need to look at this document. Naomi placed one finger on the date line. And I need you to tell me what you were doing on August 11th of last year. August 11th of last year. I sat still for about 15 seconds trying to remember. Then I took out my phone, opened my calendar, and scrolled back 8 months. I was at North Star all day on August 11th, I said. I had 2 morning meetings. I was in the editing room that afternoon. There was an internal review at 4. Did you sign any documents that day? Naomi asked. Yes. It was one of our regular payment processing days for the cinematographers. I signed transfer authorizations, acceptance certificates, and several delivery records, maybe 15 or 20 documents. Naomi nodded slowly. That is exactly what concerns me. She pointed to the paper on the table. The 17th transaction was approved at 3:47 p.m. on August 11th. It differs from the other 16 in 3 ways. Naomi held up 3 fingers. 1. This contract did not use a pre-inserted signature image. The system records show that your account authenticated and approved the document from your assigned workstation during business hours. A cold sensation moved down my spine. 2. The document was included in a package of 19 records. 18 were ordinary payment and acceptance documents. Naomi pushed the index toward me. The 19th document was actually a licensing agreement, but its file name, reference number, and cover page were designed to resemble a routine rights acceptance certificate. 3. The person who created the document package and sent it to your account for approval was Derek Shaw. I closed my eyes and tried to remember that afternoon. I did not remember. That was the frightening part. Over the years, I had processed hundreds of similar documents. That day, I also had to finish the rough cut of episode 3/6 in the evening. When Derek sent a package presented as payment paperwork for cinematographers, I approved it because I believed it contained money for people waiting to be paid. My account signed the document package, I said, and I may have clicked approve without realizing the contract was inside it. Yes, if this is reported to investigators, this will be the first document that makes an investigator ask questions, Naomi said. Did you know about that transaction? Did you receive any benefit from it? Or did the suspension of the masters begin only after the relationship between the parties deteriorated? I sat very still. That is why you told me to sit down before hearing this? Yes, but the next part is why I stayed awake almost all night. Naomi opened her laptop. After finding the August 11th transaction, I instructed the provider to preserve every deleted version in the shared staging space. The staging space belonged to Wildframe's business account. North Star had limited write access for delivery of previews, sidecar metadata, and footage-related documents. On April 17th, 2 days before the appointment meeting, a file named transition_plan _v3_draft.docx appeared in staging. Who uploaded it? The logs identified Derek's account as the creator and uploader. The document was created in a working folder that had automatic synchronization with staging enabled. Naomi opened the audit report. Derek deleted it 40 minutes later, probably after realizing it had appeared in the wrong location. But the system retained versions. The provider recovered an authenticated copy with an integrity checksum. I looked at the screen. It was a 3-page table-formatted document written in the language of an ordinary administrative transition plan. Naomi read each item. Phase 1. After access confirmation is complete, transfer the project-related masters to North Star's internal infrastructure. Phase 2. Consolidate rights records under a single point of control and identify M. Bennett as the historical administrator during the pre-transition period. Phase 3. Conduct a compliance audit documenting deficiencies in the prior rights management process before approval authority is centralized. Phase 4. The new executive producer reports the audit findings and proposes a remediation plan. Phase 5. Consider personnel action against the individual responsible for the prior process. Beside the final item was a short note. Before June. Naomi stopped reading. The conference room was silent. In the hallway, the only sound was a printer running in the next room. You understand where this document was leading, Naomi said. I did. If the plan had been carried out, North Star would have obtained a technical copy of the project masters outside Wildframe's access control system. The copying itself would not create additional legal usage rights, but I would no longer control who was using those files. The 17 unauthorized transactions would be consolidated into a record tied to the period when I managed rights administration. Derek would become the new executive producer, the person who discovered the deficiencies in the old process and reported them to senior management. And I would be documented as a negligent administrator. That plan could not create a valid chain of title by itself, nor could it turn forged signatures into genuine ones. But it could help Derek shift responsibility onto me, create the appearance that North Star was correcting an internal failure, and then pressure Wildframe or the rights holders into retroactively confirming completed transactions. If it worked, Derek would have a story to give the customers. The violations belonged to the old process. The responsible employee had been disciplined. The new executive producer had corrected the problem, and the $470,000 on hold could return to the negotiating table. 3 days ago, I said slowly, I sat in the screening room believing they did not choose me because I was not good enough. Maya! I asked myself what I had done wrong. I truly believed I might not have what it took to lead. I looked at Naomi. They did not need me to stay because they valued my ability. They needed my account, my signature, and my work history positioned where responsibility could be placed on them. Naomi did not answer immediately. Her silence was the answer. And the most important detail, Naomi said, is that this plan worked best while you remained a North Star employee. She pointed to the document. You had to stay inside the system. You had to keep signing records. And you had to confirm the document placing Derek in control of footage use approvals and communications with the cinematographers. The executive producer title did not give Derek authority to sign for Wildframe, I said. No, but if you signed confirmation of the new structure, he would have another document creating the appearance that you accepted his control as broader than it actually was. And I took off my badge. You left your employee role the same morning they presented that document. Naomi closed the laptop. The plan's most useful link broke at that moment. Not because you discovered the plan, you did not yet know it existed. She looked at me. It broke because you refused to sign, resigned, and transformed yourself from an employee who could be assigned blame into the representative of an independent licensing partner. I thought of Derek standing outside the 4th-floor elevator, pale, saying, "Restore the access." Now I understood. Derek had not only been watching the film lose its master files, he had been watching his plan to transfer responsibility to me lose its most important condition. I sat silently for a while. Then I thought about the confrontation in my apartment. Naomi, what did my family pressure me to do yesterday? They asked you to apologize to Victor, return to North Star, and keep working under Derek for 3 months. Without knowing it, they asked me to do exactly what the plan required. Yes, my parents did not know. I have seen no evidence that they knew, Naomi said. But Derek knew family pressure might bring you back, and he used it. I picked up my coffee. It had gone cold long ago. What do I do now? 3 things, Naomi said. 1. You do not communicate directly with anyone at North Star. Everything goes through me. 2. You prepare a statement for me concerning August 11th. Include only what you genuinely remember and what your calendar, emails, or logs can confirm. 3. My phone vibrated on the table. We both looked down. A new email. Sender, Victor Lang, President, North Star Media. Copied, legal, human resources, and an address ending in at *Aurora, streaming.com*. The subject line contained only one short sentence. Emergency screening Synthestrix T. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Let me read it with you. Naomi said, do not respond to anything. But the email was already open on the screen. Victor's email was exactly 1 page long, and I need you to notice how it was written. There was no apology, no question. It read like an approved schedule. North Star requires your presence at 9 tomorrow morning in the 17th floor screening room. Then 6 bullet points. 1. Bring WildFrame's archive administration device. 2. Restore authentication for the master files associated with predators at the edge on site. 3. Permit North Star's post-production team to relink the media for the first 3 episodes. 4. Sign an addendum granting North Star direct technical administration of the project's master files while production is completed. 5. Confirm in the presence of the attendees that the delay resulted from an interruption of technical access at an external storage system and that the issue had been resolved. 6. Sign a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement concerning the rights dispute, except for communications with counsel or disclosures required by law. Then came what they offered in return, written in the voice of people who believed they were being extraordinarily generous. If I completed those requirements, North Star would not pursue civil claims at that time. I would receive a goodwill payment equal to 3 months of my former salary. The company would also provide neutral confirmation of my employment dates and limit external discussion of the termination of my employment, except where legally required or requested by a partner. In other words, sign, accept our version of events, and North Star will not deliberately make me an industry-wide problem. I turned the screen toward Naomi. She read the entire email, then opened the calendar invitation attached below it. Maya, have you looked carefully at the attendee list? No. Then look. I looked. The email itself had been sent only to Victor, Derek, Legal, Human Resources, and me. But the screening invitation also included 2 members of North Star's investment committee, the head of production, and a woman named Camille Ross, using an @AuroraStreaming.com address. Who is Camille Ross? I asked. She heads documentaries at Aurora and is one of the people with decision-making authority over whether this project continues. Naomi leaned back. Maya, this is not an ordinary working meeting. This is a staged pressure session. Explain. They place you in a room with North Star's leadership and an important Aurora representative. Then they present the delay as the result of a technical access problem at an outside provider system. And then they ask me to confirm it. Yes. If you confirm it, they have the statement of WildFrame's own representative. What if I refuse? They will try to interpret your reaction in whatever way benefits them. If you remain silent, they may call it a lack of objection. If you become angry or leave, they may call you uncooperative. Naomi looked directly at me. But your presence alone does not prove their version, especially if you attend with counsel and make no statements outside a prepared record. I reread bullet point 5. Confirm in the presence of the attendees. They wanted me to help turn a dispute over usage rights into a resolved technical incident. Naomi, I said, they still believe I know nothing, don't they? For the first time all afternoon, Naomi smiled. There is no indication they know we preserved the access logs, recovered the transition plan, or traced the 17 transactions. She tapped one finger on the file. Derek knows those transactions exist. What he does not know is that we found them. Then that is our advantage. Surprise is our advantage, and it exists only until we put the evidence on the table. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Naomi spoke more slowly. I am obligated to explain 3 options clearly. Wait, 1. Do not attend. I respond for you in writing and require every future communication to pass through counsel. That approach is slower and more expensive, but it reduces the risk of direct confrontation. 2. Attend with me. Confirm only that every communication must be handled through counsel, restore no access, sign no documents, and answer no substantive questions. And 3? 3 is that we attend but do not reveal the entire file. Naomi placed a hand on the documents. We present a selected set of evidence: the access logs, the master copy requests, the metadata change attempts, and indications that Wildframe was impersonated. What about Silverline? We disclose only enough to force Northstar and Aurora to preserve records and stop using their current version of events. The originals, legal analysis, and details of the 17th transaction remain here. She looked directly at me. If you choose option 3, you need to understand the consequences. Once evidence of fraudulent contracts, unauthorized use of your signature, and diverted funds is placed on the table, there is a high likelihood Northstar, Aurora, the customers, or the rights holders will have to consider reporting the matter to investigators. I said nothing. The person at the center of that file is Lauren's husband, Naomi continued. Lauren is nearly 20 weeks pregnant. Your parents just came to your apartment to pressure you into rescuing him. After tomorrow, your relationship with your family may never be repaired. I need you to understand that today, not discover it for the first time in the middle of tomorrow morning's meeting. I looked through the conference room window. Below, traffic on Larchmont Boulevard continued moving as though nothing had changed. I thought of Lauren standing in my apartment doorway, turning back and waiting for me to step forward. I thought of Samuel Otieno sitting in the auditorium in Nairobi, seeing footage he had shot used for a purpose he had never approved. And I thought of my signature beneath contracts I had never seen. Then I turned back to Naomi. You are wrong about one thing. What? My parents may not know what Derek is doing. I pulled the file toward me. But they still chose to demand my sacrifice before they were willing to hear the truth. Naomi was silent for several seconds. You choose option 3? I will not walk into that room to accept blame for them. I placed my hand on the file, but I am not going to reveal our entire strategy to Derek either. Naomi nodded. Then we will prepare a package strong enough to destroy Northstar's version, but not enough to warn them about everything we know. She closed her laptop, picked up the office phone, and called her assistant. Cancel the rest of my schedule today. Reserve this room through the evening, and contact the infrastructure provider. I need written confirmation of evidence preservation before 8. Naomi put down the phone. All right, she said. Tonight we prepare for 9 tomorrow morning. We worked in Naomi's office from 6 in the evening until nearly 2 in the morning. On the conference table, we divided the documents into 9 groups. Naomi called them the 9 pillars. Each group had to prove one separate fact, even if none of the other groups was presented. Pillar 1. The 11 primary source agreements between Wildframe and the cinematographers, whose material appeared in Predators at the Edge. Each agreement clearly stated the scope of sublicensing, authorized uses, fees, term, and credit requirements. Pillar 2. The rights matrix for the 11 footage sources, matching each used shot to the corresponding agreement and the scope of rights granted. Pillar 3. The metadata reports and ingest history for the 17 disputed clips, especially the 7 files targeted for alteration: creation date, camera code, creator name, checksum, and the time each file entered Wildframe's system. No precise coordinates. Wildframe never included sensitive wildlife locations in delivery documents. Pillar 4, the invisible forensic fingerprint. Every preview or delivery copy exported by Wildframe carried a unique identifier, showing for whom the copy was created and on what date. Northstar had not been given the technical details of this mechanism, but the code mapping table and verification records remained stored in Wildframe's audit system. Pillar 5. The access logs preserved by the infrastructure provider, including failed authentication attempts, the 3 bulk copy requests, and the attempts to alter 2 rights data fields. Pillar 6, the 17 licensing agreements presented in Wildframe's name but never validly approved. Pillar 7, the letter designating Silverline Creative as collection agent, the customer invoices, transfer receipts, confirming approximately $180,000 in payments, and notices suspending the remaining approximately $470,000. Pillar 8, the 41 emails Derek sent me after 10 at night, together with delivery emails and version history reports exported from Northstar's system, showing who actually created and revised the edits for which he received credit. My records contain no project files or edits owned by Northstar. Pillar 9, Victor's threatening letter and the 5-phase transition plan recovered from the staging space. But we did not bring all 9 groups into the screening room. Naomi divided everything into 2 sets. The first was the presentation file. It contained only the documents necessary to disprove Northstar's version and require every party to preserve evidence. The primary source agreements, the rights matrix, the access logs, the 3 master copy requests, the unsuccessful metadata changes, the 2 contracts showing the clearest signs of impersonation, and the formal evidence preservation notice. The second set was the privileged legal file. Naomi kept it at her office. It contained the complete Silverline file, the 17th transaction, the full transition plan, the original technical reports, and our investigative strategy. Naomi printed the presentation set, numbered every page, and placed it in a black document case. Why print it? I asked. Everything exists electronically. Because tomorrow morning we are entering a room controlled by Northstar, she said. We will not depend on its Wi-Fi, projector, or access permissions. Naomi pointed to the case. The paper copy is the first layer. I will carry an encrypted electronic copy. The originals and technical files remain preserved here. At 11 that night, I made the call I had postponed all evening. Rafael Ortega, 62 years old Mexican, 30 years filming wildlife. He was the person who captured the opening shot, the mother cheetah, standing in a dry riverbed with 3 cubs huddled behind her. He had lain in the brush for 9 days to obtain those 4 seconds. Samuel Otieno was the reason Wildframe existed. Rafael was the first cinematographer to sign an agreement after the company was formally established. It was already midnight in Oaxaca. He answered anyway. Naomi sat beside me. Before asking anything, she introduced herself as Wildframe's attorney and made clear that she did not separately represent Rafael. We need to confirm the scope of the rights you granted, Naomi said. I will ask neutral questions. You only need to answer based on what you remember and what your agreement provides. All right, Rafael said. Naomi began. Within what scope did you authorize Wildframe to use the mother cheetah footage? Documentary use, Rafael answered. The Predators at the Edge project, no commercial advertising. Did you ever authorize that shot for use in an SUV advertising campaign by a German automaker? No. Did you ever authorize Derek Shaw, Northstar Media, or Silverline Creative to license that footage on your behalf? Never. Did anyone ever ask you to expand the usage rights? No. I looked at Naomi. She recorded every answer. I need to ask once more to be certain, I said. Would you give those same answers if questioned in front of Northstar's lawyers and an Aurora representative? Yes. At 9 tomorrow morning Los Angeles time, 10 in Oaxaca, can you join a video call? This time Rafael did not hesitate. I will be available from 9:30. You only need to discuss your footage and the rights you granted, Naomi said. Do not speculate about Derek, Northstar, or any other transaction. I understand. Rafael paused, then said my name. Maya. I'm here. In 30 years, I have seen my images used outside the rights I granted many times. His voice remained calm. Very few people call me back and ask, before making the decision for me. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow you will be able to say that for yourself. After the call ended, Naomi sent Rafael the invitation, the scope of the meeting, and a copy of his own source agreement. I sat quietly in the conference room for a long time. By nearly 2 in the morning, everything was complete. Naomi closed the black document case, fastened the lock, and pushed it toward me. This is your presentation file, she said. I am keeping the originals, the technical records, and all privileged materials. Tomorrow you will be the person who opens the case. Naomi placed a hand on the papers inside. But I will decide which document is presented and when. I arrived home at 2:30. I could not sleep. At 3 in the morning, I got up, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and removed a small velvet box. 3 years earlier, when I entered the store on Wilshire Boulevard to buy Derek's pen, the salesperson placed 2 identical pens on the counter, one for Derek, one for me. I thought that if I was helping someone begin a new career, perhaps I should also give myself something to mark what I was building. But when I came home, I put the pen in a drawer. I never used it. There was always a voice in my mind telling me I had not accomplished anything important enough to deserve it. For 3 years, the pen remained untouched in its box. I opened the lid. Jet black barrel, silver cap, not a single scratch. It was the twin of the pen Derek had used in the screening room when he placed his name on the position that should have been mine. I picked it up. This time, I did not return it to the drawer. I opened the black document case, clipped the pen into the slot inside, and locked the case again. Then I went to bed. For exactly 3 hours. At 8:52 the next morning, I entered the lobby of North Star Media as a visitor. The receptionist was Dana, the woman I had greeted every morning for 7 years. She printed a paper visitor badge, attached it to my jacket, and avoided looking me directly in the eye. Naomi stood beside me. The night before, she had provided written notice that she represented me and Wildframe Archives in every communication related to the meeting. I held the black document case. I did not bring Wildframe's laptop. No administrative device, no authentication token, nothing that could be used to restore master access on site. We entered the elevator. It passed the 4th floor, where my former editing room still sat behind closed doors, and continued to the 17th. 5 days earlier, I had entered that same elevator with a cardboard box at my feet. Today, I stepped out with an attorney beside me and a document case in my hand. The screening room door opened, and I immediately understood how carefully the room had been arranged. The 2 rows of gray velvet chairs once used for screenings had been pushed against the walls. A long conference table with 12 seats occupied the center of the room. Victor sat at the head of the table closest to the screen. Derek and 2 North Star attorneys sat to his right. Each had a document packet marked with yellow tabs. To Victor's left sat the head of Human Resources, the head of Production, and 2 members of the Investment Committee. Near the middle of the table, directly beneath the projection screen, sat a woman around 40 in a gray sweater with short hair. An open notebook lay in front of her. Camille Ross. Aurora streaming. She greeted no one. She simply held a pen and observed. Marcus, Priya, and a post-production technician sat in the 2 rows of chairs against the wall. North Star had called them there on the premise that master access would be restored that morning, and that the post-production team needed to be ready to verify the timelines. Derek sat immediately to Victor's right. He had showered, shaved, and looked as though he had slept enough. A brand new charcoal suit, a perfectly knotted tie. No trace remained of the man in the wrinkled shirt who had stood in my living room 2 days earlier. Between 2 fingers was a fountain pen with a black barrel and silver cap. The pen I had once given him. Derek turned it slowly and watched me enter. I read the expression on his face immediately. Relief. He thought I had come to surrender. Derek still believed my arriving on time meant the family pressure had worked. Maya! Victor stood, smiled, and extended one hand as though welcoming an old friend. Thank you for coming. I know the past few days have been difficult for all of us. All of us. Please, you and your attorney may sit. 2 chairs had been prepared at the far end of the table. Mine was the seat farthest from the screen and from Camille. Naomi's chair had been placed slightly behind it, as though she were merely accompanying me rather than representing Wildframe as counsel. That was the position for someone expected to listen, accept the prepared version, and sign wherever marked. 5 days earlier, I had sat in this same room and listened to Victor tell me I lacked leadership presence. This time, I did not walk toward those 2 chairs. I went directly to the screen, to the place where presenters usually stood, and set the black document case on the table. Naomi came with me and stood slightly to my right. I placed both hands on the case. I did not sit. A very small movement passed through the room. Priya shifted in her chair. One North Star attorney looked up from his documents. Camille Ross stopped writing and looked directly at me for the first time. Ms. Bennett, one of North Star's attorneys said, please take a seat. I will stand. Victor kept smiling, but the corners of his mouth had tightened. Maya, we do not need to make this more confrontational than necessary. I completely agree, I said. Shall we begin? Victor sat, cleared his throat, and turned to Camille in a voice that had clearly been rehearsed. Mrs. Ross, as I explained by phone, the recent delay resulted from an interruption of technical access at the project's external storage system. He placed both hands on the table. North Star invited Ms. Bennett here today to complete restoration of master authentication, allow our post-production team to relink the first 3 episodes, and execute an addendum granting North Star direct technical administration of the master files associated with Predators at the Edge until production is complete. Camille said nothing. She wrote one line in her notebook. Naomi spoke before Victor could continue. For accuracy of the record, Wildframe Archives is not North Star's infrastructure provider. The room went quiet. Wildframe is an independent licensing partner, Naomi said. The present issue concerns the scope of usage rights and contractual delivery of master files, not an ordinary server outage. Victor turned toward her. There will be time for legal interpretations later. This is not an interpretation, Naomi replied. It is the legal status of the parties. Camille wrote another line. Victor looked toward the attorney seated to his left. The attorney opened a briefcase, removed a carefully bound document, and slid it down the table toward me. It stopped beside my black document case. The cover read in bold, Addendum for Master Administration and Project Access. Below it, in smaller type, Parties North Star Media Inc. and Wildframe Archives, LLC. I did not touch it. Naomi leaned down to read the first page. Victor said, This document applies only to the master files associated with Predators at the Edge. It permits North Star to administer technical access during completion of production, prevents a similar disruption from recurring, and ensures Aurora receives the first 3 episodes on the revised schedule. And it does not transfer ownership of the original copyrights? Naomi asked. No. It creates no sub-licensing rights beyond the scope of the existing agreements? No. It does not apply to the remainder of Wildframe's library? Victor paused. All of that is explained in the document. Naomi did not answer. She simply placed one finger on the first page, marking the spot that would require careful review before anyone said anything more. Derek stopped turning the pen. He set it on the table with the nib pointing toward me, then pushed it a few inches closer. This, Victor said, is how we put this entire matter behind us today. The pen stopped between North Star's document and my black case. Victor opened the file in front of him. He did not read to me. He turned toward Camille Ross. On April 19th, Ms. Bennett resigned from North Star and suspended delivery of the master files managed by Wildframe. That prevented North Star from completing the first 3 episodes on schedule. Naomi spoke. For accuracy of the record, North Star retained every timeline, proxy, and item of internal data. Wildframe did not delete or alter any North Star asset. Victor looked at her and continued. Nevertheless, the lack of master files disrupted completion of the project and placed Aurora's release schedule at risk. North Star considers this an act of holding project materials hostage. Those master files are not owned by North Star, Naomi said. The company has only contractual usage rights. Camille wrote another line. Victor closed the file. Maya, I do not want litigation. This offer is available only this morning. He raised 4 fingers. 1. You sign the addendum allowing North Star to administer the master files associated with Predators at the Edge during completion of production. 2. You restore master authentication so the post-production team can relink the first 3 episodes. 3. You confirm that the delay resulted from an interruption of technical access at an external storage system, and that the issue has been resolved. 4. You sign a confidentiality agreement, except for communications with counsel or disclosures required by law. Victor leaned back. In return, North Star will not pursue civil claims at this time. You will receive a goodwill payment equal to 3 months of your former salary and neutral employment verification. I looked at the addendum on the table. They needed access first. Then they needed my confirmation to turn a rights dispute into a technical incident. Then Derek spoke. Maya, don't make this worse. He leaned forward. Lauren is pregnant. This affects Lauren and the entire family. Sign it. 3 months from now, no one will ever mention this again. The head of human resources looked at Derek. One North Star attorney stopped turning pages. He had just introduced family pressure into a meeting attended by Aurora Legal and the investment committee, not because he expected it to change my decision. He wanted the room to interpret my refusal as an act against Lauren and her unborn child. Camille wrote another line. Derek's fountain pen lay on the table with its nib pointing toward me. I looked at it for 2 seconds. The small scratch near the clip was still there. I did not touch it. I moved North Star's addendum aside and placed the black document case beside it. The 2 sets of documents lay parallel on the table. Maya, Victor said, are you listening to me? Yes, I hear you very clearly. I looked at Naomi. She nodded once. I unlocked the document case but did not remove anything. Before I sign anything, Ms. Ross needs to know one fact. I turned toward Camille. North Star does not own the original copyrights to the footage sources in the film. It has only the usage rights stated in the agreements. The room went silent. The chain of title records for 11 primary sources are currently insufficient for commercial distribution of the film to Aurora. Camille put down her pen. Victor spoke. That is Ms. Bennett's interpretation. No, Naomi said. That is the current status of the rights records. I continued. I am not saying everyone at North Star knows this. I am saying Aurora is being asked to continue with a project when the distribution rights chain for the primary footage sources remains incomplete. Camille looked directly at me. Would you repeat that? I opened the black document case. I will present 5 points. Each point is supported by documents. Naomi distributed the numbered presentation packets. They contained only the materials we had decided to disclose. Point 1. Wildframe Archives is an independent limited liability company registered in California 4 years ago. It is not owned by, controlled by, or a subsidiary of North Star. Pages began turning. Point 2. North Star does not own the original copyrights to the 11 primary footage sources in Predators at the Edge. The copyrights belong to the respective cinematographers. Wildframe manages and sublicenses only within the scope of each agreement. I indicated the next group of documents. These are the 11 authenticated source agreements, stating the scope of rights, term, fees, and credit requirements. Point 3. North Star's current license is primarily limited to production and development. Commercial distribution documentation for the 11 primary footage sources has not been completed. An attorney seated to Victor's right quickly turned to the licensing section. Point 4. On April 19th, North Star asked me to confirm that Mr. Derek Shaw had authority to approve footage use in the project and control communications with the rights holders. I placed a finger on the document. North Star may assign internal responsibilities, but this document does not transfer copyright, expand a license, or amend the agreement between North Star and Wildframe. I moved to the final group. Point 5. After the suspension notice, the system recorded 14 authentication requests from North Star's IP range. Some may have been automatic connections, but 4 were initiated through the administrative interface. I turned another page. The following day, 3 bulk copy requests were manually created, targeting approximately 40 terabytes of project-related master files. All 3 failed. These are the audit logs authenticated and preserved by the infrastructure provider. I looked up. Those are the 5 points. Victor turned to Ken Wallace, North Star's chief legal counsel. Ken? Ken did not answer immediately. He compared the agreements with the packet in front of him and stopped at the scope of license section. These documents match the legal records North Star currently holds, he said. Victor tightened his jaw. What does that mean? The current license is a production and development license. Ken looked at Camille. At this time, I cannot confirm that North Star has a complete chain of title for commercial distribution. Marcus turned toward Priya. Camille opened a new page in her notebook and wrote quickly. Victor was silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Maya, North Star clearly failed to appreciate Wildframe's value fully. We should speak as 2 business partners. He made 3 offers. North Star is prepared to open discussions concerning an acquisition of or strategic investment in Wildframe, subject to independent valuation and board approval. We will also send you a formal offer to return as executive producer of the project. Victor paused. And Mr. Shaw will be removed from the project immediately and placed on administrative leave while North Star conducts an internal review. He did not look at Derek, who sat immediately to his right. 5 days earlier, Victor had called Derek the face of the project. Now Derek had become a risk that needed to be removed from the table. His hand tightened around the fountain pen. "Mr. Lang," I said, "I reject all 3 offers." "Maya, Wildframe is not for sale. I am not returning to North Star. And whether your company retains or removes Mr. Shaw is not something I am offering in exchange for anything." I closed the presentation packet. "You are trying to solve the wrong problem." Victor frowned. "What are you saying?" Naomi removed a sealed envelope from her case. Inside were only 2 contracts showing signs of impersonation: the letter appointing Silverline Creative as collection agent, and 1 transfer confirmation supplied by a customer. She placed the envelope on the table. "These are selected supplemental materials," Naomi said. "The originals and the complete investigative file remain preserved." I looked directly at Victor. "The problem is not only an incomplete distribution rights chain." I placed my hand on the envelope. "There are 17 licensing transactions presented in Wildframe's name that my company never approved." I turned toward Derek. "And we have documents connecting Mr. Shaw to the creation of those transactions." Naomi removed the redacted copies from the supplemental envelope and distributed them along the table. The customer names, campaign sectors, countries, clip names, and file codes had all been blacked out. Over the past 14 months, I said, 17 clips whose rights are managed by Wildframe appeared in 17 separate licensing transactions allocated among 5 customers. None of those transactions was approved by Wildframe or reviewed against the rights holder's terms. No payment was recorded in Wildframe's accounts. I turned to the first sample contract. 16 contracts used an image of my signature and my title block, but none contains a digital signature certificate, confirmation email, or log showing that I approved it. The 17th transaction has different characteristics and is not included in the materials distributed today. I moved to the Silverline section. The contracts designate Silverline Creative, LLC, as collection agent. The company was registered in Nevada 16 months ago. Public records show no website, client list, or clear business activity beyond its formation filing, and the receiving account identified in the contracts. Brandon Cole is listed as managing member. I placed a finger on the payment confirmation. The total committed value of the 17 transactions is $650,000. Customer-provided receipts confirm that approximately $180,000 was transferred to an account in Silverline's name. Someone seated against the wall inhaled sharply. Camille Ross stopped writing and quickly turned to the Silverline section. Derek shot to his feet. "This is completely fabricated." His chair fell backward and struck the wall. "Victor, don't listen to her." "I know what she's trying to do. I discovered this problem 2 months ago." He turned toward Camille and spoke very quickly. "She sold the footage. She manages Wildframe. I do not have the passwords, and I do not have authority to approve transactions for that company." I accepted the executive producer position because I found signs of irregularities and needed authority to review the records. "Mr. Shaw," Ken began. "No, let me finish." Derek pointed at me. "She suspended the master files the same day I was appointed." "Why?" "Because she knew I was about to review the records. She locked access to prevent North Star from finding out what happened. Now she has brought an attorney here and is using a rights dispute to pressure the company." He was breathing hard. "I may have been wrong about many things, but I did not sell those shots." Victor looked at Ken. "Do these documents prove Mr. Shaw created the contracts?" Ken reviewed the copies. "They show contracts presented in Wildframe's name, the entity that received the money, and confirmed payments." He put the documents down. "They do not yet directly prove who created the contracts." The 2 investment committee members looked at each other. Marcus turned back to the Silverline section. Naomi lightly touched my arm and gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. I did not argue. I waited until the room was quiet, then looked at Derek. "You say I sold the footage?" "Yes." "Then which clip are you talking about?" I paused. "The lion pride in the sandstorm, or the mother cheetah standing in the dry riverbed?" Derek answered immediately. "The mother cheetah. You sold it to the German automaker's SUV campaign." The room went silent. Naomi looked at Ken. "The copies distributed in this room have redacted the customer name, campaign sector, country, clip name, and file code." She pointed to the blacked out sections. Nothing in the presentation materials identifies a transaction involving the mother cheetah footage or a German automaker's SUV campaign. Ken checked every page again. Derek remained standing. I read it somewhere. Where? Camille asked. Her voice was not loud. In the records, during my review. Which records, Mr. Shaw? Derek did not answer. Camille closed her notebook. You just stated that you had no password and no access to Wildframe. Now you say you read records containing details that do not appear in the materials distributed this morning. Derek looked at Victor. I don't remember exactly. Maybe someone sent them to me. Who? Camille asked. He could not answer. Naomi spoke. The detail Mr. Shaw just supplied does not by itself prove that he created the transaction, but it proves that he knew information not disclosed in this meeting. Victor slowly turned toward Derek. 5 days earlier, he had called Derek the face of the project. Now he looked at him like an unanswered question. I closed the packet in front of me. I think we should hear from the person who filmed that shot. Naomi opened her laptop, used a private secure connection, and connected it to the screen with a presentation cable. The screen behind me came to life. In Oaxaca, where it was 10 in the morning, Rafael Ortega was waiting. The 62-year-old man who had filmed the mother cheetah in the dry riverbed, and the only person in that room authorized to say exactly how he had permitted the footage to be used. Naomi looked into the camera. Mr. Ortega, I represent Wildframe Archives, not you individually. You are participating voluntarily and consent to this call being recorded, correct? Correct. Please confirm your identity and your relationship with Wildframe Archives. Rafael Ortega, freelance cinematographer. I signed a licensing agreement with Wildframe 4 years ago. It remains in effect. Did you film the mother cheetah standing in a dry riverbed with 3 cubs behind her? Yes, I waited 9 days to capture that shot. For what purpose did you license that footage? For use only in the documentary Predators at the Edge. No advertising, no brand campaigns, and no branded content. Naomi projected 1 page of the contract onto the screen. Did you ever authorize use of this footage in an SUV advertising campaign by a German automaker? No. Did you authorize North Star, Derek Shaw, or Silverline Creative to license it on your behalf? None of them. Did you receive any payment from that transaction? Not 1 cent. Raphael leaned toward the camera. I want to add something. In September of last year, Derek Shaw called me. He said North Star was streamlining its licensing process and asked me to work directly with him instead of through Maya. How did you respond? Naomi asked. I said no. I signed with Wildframe, not North Star. He called 2 more times. Do you still have the call records? Yes. Naomi looked at Ken. Do you have any questions concerning the scope of rights Mr. Ortega granted? Ken shook his head. Not at this time. We request that Mr. Ortega preserve his agreement and call history. I will preserve them, Raphael said. Naomi thanked him and ended the call. The screen changed to the next document. 3 technical facts, she said. First, the customer-provided clip carries a forensic fingerprint matching a technical delivery copy Wildframe created specifically for North Star. The request to create that delivery copy bears approval code D.Shaw. Naomi changed pages. This data does not independently prove who directly performed the action, but it links the copy used in the transaction to a request carrying Mr. Shaw's approval code. Second, the contract PDF provided by the customer contains an author field of D.Shaw and a device code consistent with the workstation North Star assigned to Mr. Shaw. Metadata is supporting evidence, not an independent conclusion. She opened the final page. Third, the contract designates Silverline Creative as collection agent. Nevada Records identify Brandon Cole as managing member. Customer-provided receipts confirm that payment was sent to an account in Silverline's name. Naomi turned toward Derek. Mr. Shaw, would you like to explain your relationship with Brandon Cole? Derek did not answer. Camille Ross closed her notebook. Mr. Lang? Victor looked up. Effective immediately. My team will suspend every intake and release process involving Predators at the Edge until the chain of title is verified. Aurora Legal will issue formal notice today. I will also request a review of Aurora's other active projects with North Star. Ms. Ross, we can absolutely... Mr. Lang, I have just heard North Star pressure a licensing partner to surrender administration of master files and confirm that this was merely a technical incident. She looked at Ken. while your chief legal counsel has just confirmed that the commercial distribution records are incomplete. Camille stood and picked up her bag. All further communications will go through legal. She left. Ken spoke next. Mr. Shaw, this is an evidence preservation demand. Place your company laptop and phone on the table. Do not power them off, log out, delete, or alter any data. The head of human resources stood. You are suspended with pay while North Star conducts an internal investigation. Within minutes, IT disabled all of Derek's access. Security was called to the 17th floor. There were no police, no handcuffs. That only happens in movies. What actually happened was a man in a charcoal suit, standing in the center of a conference room, placing his company laptop and phone on the table, while his accounts were locked one by one. Naomi collected the numbered copies and locked the black document case. So that all parties understand, she said. Wildframe will continue preserving all evidence and make any required reports to the appropriate authorities after completing legal review. Documents showing signs of impersonation, use of an unauthenticated signature, and payments across multiple states cannot be addressed solely through an internal employment investigation. Security reached the door. Derek walked past where I stood. He stopped. You are destroying your family. I looked directly at him. No, I said. I am only refusing to keep hiding the person who did it. He walked out. On the wooden table where he had been sitting, the black and silver fountain pen still lay. He had forgotten it. I did not bring down North Star Media. I need to make that clear because, over the next 2 weeks, many people in the industry told the story differently. What happened was very simple. Everything they had concealed began coming due. Week 1. On day 2, North Star issued written confirmation that Derek Shaw had been suspended with pay, that all his access had been revoked, and that an internal investigation had begun. On day 3, Aurora Streaming formally suspended all intake and release obligations for Predators at the Edge, citing its warranties concerning usage rights and chain of title. 2 other North Star projects were also placed under legal review. On day 5, Naomi transferred the file and preservation requests to the appropriate authorities. That same day, we sent notice to all 23 cinematographers, the first letter in my life that I rewrote 9 times. Those whose footage appeared in the disputed transactions sent reservation of rights letters and demanded explanations from North Star and Silverline Creative. By day 8, the banks involved had begun processing recovery requests and transaction restrictions concerning the disputed funds. Week 2, North Star's board held an emergency meeting on Tuesday. On Thursday, Victor Lang resigned as head of North Star for personal reasons. The announcement was 4 lines long and did not mention the film. On Friday, after 3 projects had been suspended or placed under review, North Star announced the elimination of 11 post-production positions. Priya was among those laid off. She texted me at 9 that night. The message contained one sentence. Maya, I am sorry I did not speak up that day. I replied, Priya, you do not owe me an apology. Send me your resume. Derek remained silent for 13 days. Then on day 14, Lauren called. I let the phone ring 4 times before answering. Lauren did not say hello. She sounded as though she had been crying before she dialed. Maya, withdraw the report? I can't, Lauren. The file has been referred to the authorities. It no longer depends on my decision. Tell them you were mistaken. Tell them it was only a misunderstanding. They will listen to you. No, I will not do that. Lauren was silent for several seconds, then began reading a list. The bank withdrew approval of the loan. The $45,000 deposit is at risk. Derek is suspended. No company will return his calls. I am due in September. I am about to have a baby, and we may lose that house. I know. My child will grow up with a father under investigation for fraud. You caused this. I sat on the edge of the bed. In the past, I would have begun explaining. I did not create 17 unauthorized transactions. I did not receive the money. I did not write a plan to place responsibility under my name. But Lauren had not called to hear the truth. She had called so I would make the consequences disappear. Lauren, I said, I am truly sorry about the house. I mean that. Then help me. I can't. You are my family. And for far too long, those words have always been used to make me pay for someone else's choices. Lauren began to cry. I listened for about 10 seconds. Then I said the last thing I intended to say. I hope your delivery goes safely. I sincerely do. but I will not discuss the investigation with anyone in the family again. I ended the call. Then I opened my contacts, selected Lauren's number, and blocked it. I sat still for about a minute, waiting for the guilt to arrive. It did, but it did not stay as long as I expected. And beneath it was something else, something it took me several days to name correctly. Relief. 6 weeks later, Wildframe Archives leased its first office. 2 small rooms on the 3rd floor of an old building in Culver City. 1 office and 1 editing room. Priya had started the previous Monday. On Thursday afternoon, the shared receptionist downstairs called to say 3 visitors had arrived without an appointment. I knew who they were before she read the names. They were sitting in the small waiting area outside the office. My mother in the middle. My father on the left. Lauren on the right. Her belly much larger than the last time I had seen her. No one stood when I came out. "Can we talk?" my mother asked. I invited them into my office. I left the door open. My mother presented her case, and this time she needed no build-up. "Only 4 things, Maya. I will say them, and then we will leave." "All right." 1. Tell the investigator Derek did not act intentionally. Say he did not understand the process. Say this was a management error, not fraud. 2. If North Star pays a settlement, use part of it to help Lauren keep the house. Lauren does not need all of it, only enough for the deposit. 3. Do not submit any more evidence. What is already submitted can stay, but do not provide anything else. She paused. 4. Put the baby's interests ahead of your anger. I sat quietly for about 5 seconds. Then I answered more briefly than I had ever spoken to them before. I will respond to all 4. Point 1. I will not tell an investigator something I do not know to be true. This was not one management error. There were 17 transactions over 14 months, following the same document pattern and using the same receiving entity. 16 documents used an image of my signature without authentication. The 17th transaction was inserted into a legitimate approval package. Point 2. No recovery has been finalized. If money is recovered in connection with the footage, the rights of the affected cinematographers must be addressed first. It is not money I may simply use to pay anyone's house deposit. Point 3. I did not submit evidence because I was angry. I submitted it because 17 transactions were presented in Wildframe's name without the company's approval. I cannot conceal evidence to protect Derek. I looked directly at my mother. And point 4. Derek was not only connected to that money, Mom. He wrote a 5-step plan to place the entire prior rights management process under my name, then appear as the person who discovered and corrected the old violations. If that plan had been completed, the disputed transactions could have been presented as misconduct from the period when I was in charge. I have that plan. It was edited immediately before the meeting appointing Derek. My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That night you called and told me not to compete with Derek. I do not think you knew. I truly do not. But you called without asking me a single question about what was happening to me. And the next morning when the family came to my apartment, everyone came to force me to return and restore Derek's access without asking why I had left. My father spoke for the first time. We did not know about that. I believe you. But you did not ask either. In every text and every call, no one asked whether I was all right. Everyone only demanded that I return or reopen the master files. Lauren spoke very softly. Maya, we are still family. Lauren, I still hope your delivery goes safely. I will still be happy to learn that the baby has been born. I stood. But I will not return to the role this family assigned me for so many years. My mother stood as well, and the last of her firmness returned to her voice. Now that you are successful, you don't need a family anymore. Is that it? And I answered with a sentence I had repeated to myself for 6 weeks. No, Mom. You did not lose me because I became successful. You lost me when you decided my success was something reserved for other people. No one said anything else. I opened the office door and told the receptionist the meeting was over. My father left first. Lauren did not look at me. My mother stopped at the door, turned and waited. Every other time, that was the moment I would have stepped forward and asked her to stay. I remained where I was. She left. I closed the office door, sat down, and opened my laptop. There was an unread email in my inbox from 20 minutes earlier. Sender, Camille Ross. Camille Ross's email was 2 lines long. Mrs. Bennett, I would like to speak with you about that footage. Not as North Star's buyer. Are you available Tuesday? We met at Aurora's office Tuesday morning, with Naomi beside me. Camille wasted no time on an introduction. Aurora still wants those images and those stories, but we do not want to continue North Star's cut. The issue is chain of title, I said. Yes, and now I know where the chain of title needs to begin. She pushed a term sheet across the table. This proposal has been approved in principle by Aurora's content and legal departments. 1. Aurora develops a new project with Wildframe Archives, serving as the lead production company. 2. You are the executive producer. 3. Wildframe executes or amends an agreement with every cinematographer whose footage is used. Fees are negotiated according to the scope of rights and paid within 30 days. 4. Each source agreement contains its own credit provision and a separate revenue sharing or release bonus mechanism. The cinematographer's name, year of filming, and region are displayed within the scope each person agrees to disclose. I read point 4 twice. You included a credit provision in the term sheet? Mrs. Bennett, I sat in that conference room for 40 minutes. I do not intend to allow anything similar to happen on an Aurora project. Naomi looked at Camille. This is a new project that will not use North Star's film title, script, timelines, edits, or internal assets? Correct. All footage must be validly relicensed through Wildframe before production? Correct. Does North Star have any role? No. I sat quietly for a moment. Then I did something even Naomi had not anticipated. I will not rebuild that film exactly as it was. Camille looked up. Can you explain? Predators at the Edge is a structure I wrote under North Star's conditions. 8 episodes organized by hunting season, 47 minutes each. I will not use their timelines, scripts, or edits. I placed a hand on the cover of my notebook. Wildframe has management rights and access to nearly 200 hours of footage under the source agreements. I can work directly with every owner of the images the new project will use. I no longer have to force those images into the structure North Star selected. Camille leaned back. Then what do you want to make? I want a new title. I want to rebuild the structure. 6 episodes longer. Each episode tells the story of both the cinematographer and the animal. Raphael waited 9 days for 4 seconds. That is part of the story, too. And it is the part North Star always cut out. What is the new title? Those Who Wait. Camille was silent for several seconds. Then she picked up her pen and wrote in her notebook. We need an outline in 3 weeks. 11 days later, Wildframe and Aurora signed an exclusive development agreement. During the first month in the new office, Wildframe's team grew to 6 people. Priya was first. The second was a rights management specialist. Marcus was third. He had left North Star 2 weeks before I called. The other 3 had worked in the 4th floor editing room, where no one stood when I left carrying the cardboard box. I hired them anyway. I understood why they had remained seated that day. I had also remained seated for far too long. During the first week, I called all 23 cinematographers in the network to explain Wildframe's new direction. For those whose footage was proposed for the project, I read every provision concerning scope of use, fees, credit, and revenue sharing. The call with Raphael lasted 40 minutes. He did not ask about money first. He asked how his name would appear on the screen. The second thing I did was remove the fountain pen from the slot inside the black document case. The twin pen. It had remained in its box for 3 years, because I had always believed I had not done anything important enough to deserve it. I opened the cap and used that pen to sign the first development agreement between Wildframe and Aurora. Then I left it on my desk. I never put it in a drawer again. 1 year after the day I removed my employee badge and placed it on the table, Wildframe Archives had 14 employees. We moved to a larger floor in the same Culver City building. There were 3 editing rooms. There was a conference room I named the Raphael Room because he visited for 3 days and spent all 3 teaching the younger employees how to wait for an animal. Those Who Wait was released on Aurora streaming the following March. 6 episodes. I was the executive producer. My name was there on the screen, in the position they had said 1 year earlier. I lacked the leadership presence to hold. What happened on the other side reached me in fragments. Through Naomi's emails, a few lines in the trade press, and things people repeated over lunch. I did not actively follow it. For a while, I thought I would want to know every step of their collapse. It turned out I did not. North Star Media lost 2 more major contracts over the following 6 months. In November, the company was acquired by a content production group based in Atlanta. The North Star name was retired. A different logo now hangs on the old building. According to the trade press, Victor Lang never again held a public executive position. The last I heard, he was working as an independent consultant for 2 small companies. He never contacted me. I did not expect him to. Derek Shaw reached an agreement with prosecutors in January. There was no trial. He admitted conduct involving falsified commercial records, agreed to reimburse the funds identified in the agreement, and received a period of probation. During 5 years of supervision, he was prohibited from holding a position with authority to approve licensing contracts or manage intellectual property. Brandon Cole reached a separate agreement, cooperated with prosecutors, and provided testimony. There were no handcuffs, no prison, and no moment when Derek fell to his knees and apologized. But for the next 5 years, every industry position he applied for required a background check. Lauren's purchase of the house in Glendale collapsed in June. Lauren and Derek moved into my parents' home in Pasadena. Lauren gave birth in September. A baby girl. I learned through a mutual friend. I sent a gift box to my parents' house. Baby clothes, no card, no sender's name. So Lauren would not have to respond. I do not know whether she guessed who sent it. No one messaged me. I still had not unblocked her number. Some evenings I thought about it. I still did not do it. My parents sent me a message on New Year's Eve. 4 words. Happy New Year, Maya. Happy New Year to you too. That was the full extent of our communication for 12 months. I do not know whether that will change. Maybe one day. But if it does, it will have to begin with a question no one in my family has ever asked me. And what about me? I sleep 8 hours a night. I run 3 times a week. I cook real meals and eat them at the table, not in front of a screen. I spent too many nights sleeping in North Star's editing room. During Wildframe's first year, I slept at the office only once. It was the night the entire team delivered the final cut to Aurora. Everyone stayed together. We ordered pizza. I still work hard. But now I work within a system where every person's name appears beside the work that person actually created. There is one question people often ask when they hear this story. If you could return to that morning, would you do anything differently? I always give the same answer. Yes, I would stand up earlier. Not 40 minutes earlier. 4 years earlier. 1 month before I told this story, the premiere took place in a small theater on Beverly Boulevard. 90 seats. I stood at the back of the room, leaning against the wall instead of sitting. An old post-production habit. Stand where you can see both the screen and the audience. Rafael Ortega flew in from Oaxaca. He wore a suit jacket, something he said he had worn only twice in his life. Priya and Marcus sat in the front row. Several cinematographers who could not attend joined by video call. The final episode ended with water returning to the riverbed that had once been dry. On the far bank, a mother cheetah led her 3 nearly grown cubs along the new grass. The screen went dark. The credits began to roll. I had never spent so much time on a credit sequence. First came the cinematographers, not compressed into one small list that rushed past the screen. One by one, each person received a full frame, along with the year of filming and the region that person had agreed to disclose. Rafael Ortega, 2022. Every cinematographer whose footage appeared in the 6 episodes received an individual credit. In the front row, Rafael sat still when his name appeared. Then came the research team, then post-production. Priya, Marcus. Every member of the Wildframe team was credited under the correct role. No one was buried under a line reading "and associates." And finally, one frame. Created and executive produced by Maya Bennett. I looked at it for about 2 seconds. Then I turned to look elsewhere. Not because I was humble. I had waited far too long to see that name in the right place, and I will not pretend it did not matter. But because there was something better to look at. In the front row, Priya was turning her phone screen so the remote participants could see the credits. Marcus sat beside her, still holding the paper coffee cup he had carried since that afternoon. Raphael turned and shook hands with another cinematographer. The lights came up. The entire room stood. None of them was looking at me. They were looking at one another. That was what those days in April had taught me. For 7 years at North Star, I believed that if I did enough, eventually someone would give me a place to stand. I was wrong. People can take only what you continue handing them in silence. North Star believed that putting Derek's name in my position would allow the film to continue as though I had never existed. But when the images disappeared, they finally understood that a name could not replace the contracts, relationships, and rights system that had kept the film standing. Thank you for staying until the end of the story. If you are the person who always stays latest, always fixes other people's mistakes, and always remains silent, so family dinner does not become uncomfortable, I hope it does not take you as many years as it took me to understand that. If this story reached you, leave a comment telling me where you are watching from, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Many more stories are waiting to be told. Your work deserves to be called by its proper name.